live.
Just gonna figure it out, I guess.
Yeah, we're gonna wing it, man. Listen, some of our best work is done by winging it.
That's true. Okay.
Almost all of my work is done by winging it. So,
yeah,
guys, I have never had a tweet that angered people more than the one about the deficit.
Bro, I saw that. Like first off, that
The
went
one
hella
about-
viral. Good for you. And yeah, people went ape shit. Let me pull it up while you explain.
yeah.
I don't know
What was
about
this
you guys,
tweet?
but
I don't know.
like tweets going nuts don't give me any fucking dopamine anymore. I've been in the game for like 15 years and it just does like nothing for me.
Yeah, your
in
dopamine
that way.
receptors are practically non-existent.
Oh, they're fried. They're totally fried. But I put out a
how
tweet.
about your cortisol?
Yeah. But I put out many a tweet that has pissed a lot of people off. But I tweeted yesterday that just a real simple fact, undeniable fact, that the last 4 Republicans have presided over increased deficits, and the last 3 Democratic presidents have presided over deficit reductions, which is this is not data that's particularly difficult to find. And I swear to you, I am getting still today hundreds of people that are like every hour, like hundreds of people. And many of them either just have no idea that this is true, and there's like 90% of them don't seem to understand the difference between debt and deficit.
Republicans cut spending and taxes. Democrats raise taxes and spending. If you raise taxes and reduce spending, you might solve the problem, or just greatly reduce spending. If by cut spending you mean increase spending, then sure, you're right.
Have they cut spending? I mean, I guess they're cutting in this bill, but
not in the whole. I mean, my God, it's going to expand the debt. It's going to blow the debt the fuck up by like $4 trillion, according to conservative estimates.
But is that because of the tax cuts, or is it because they're spending more? Like, I know they're spending more on the ICE funding. ICE is about to be the most funded federal law enforcement agency.
Billion?
Yeah, here's my hot take, and maybe Boy will agree, or disagree, and if he disagrees, fuck him. I don't think there's a substantive difference like between these unpaid tax cuts and like more conventional deficit spending. Like, these things run up the deficit and ultimately the debt anyway. It's like 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Boy, do you agree or disagree? Should we like parse through this shit? I don't think there's a meaningful difference.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely not a big difference. I mean, yeah, when you cut taxes, but you don't cut spending and the deficit goes up, it's just a form of stimulus to the economy, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons why the growth projections from this bill are generally positive, right? It's like, okay, well, obviously, if you cut taxes and you don't substantially cut spending, well, then you're just stimulating the economy with deficit spending, right? So that's going to probably be good for growth on net because you're not like clawing back a bunch of money through taxation. But that's only in the short term, obviously. There's this sort of long-term argument about accumulating debt and its effect on the economy. So yeah, it's a pretty, it's pretty much, business as usual, like Hutch said. I think that in the history of like collecting data on the federal deficit, I think there was I think Nixon balanced the budget for like a year or two. I think Eisenhower, same thing. But overall, they added to the debt a lot. And then when you look at, obviously, like, I think Clinton balanced the budget fully.
There's a budget surplus under President Clinton.
Yeah, he fully balanced the budget. The deficit reduced under Obama, and it reduced under Biden. So I don't know. I mean, it seems somewhat clear that Democrats are at least better at balancing the budget. To that person's point, obviously, it's like, okay, well, the Democrats just want to raise taxes, and it's like, yeah, but that's good, because things the government does are like worth paying for, like the things the government does are good, right? So you probably want to pay for them.
Well, we'll see.
Like the median American, they want these programs like Medicare and Medicaid, and they want these government assistance programs to a certain degree, but they also want low taxes. So it's like the median voter. So it's like really difficult to kind of reconcile these things.
It's difficult to reconcile, but keep in mind, like, as you go down in the tax bracket, like in terms of like, the amount of money people earn, your tax base gets larger and larger and larger, right? And so at the same time that, for instance, you might look at like the middle class. Oh, the middle class is only getting $600 on average or something from their taxes being lowered. That's $600 multiplied by like so many millions of more people than like the top 1% who are getting, $300,000 as an average tax cut. So like in theory, to balance the budget, you wouldn't have to like raise the rates of taxation that much per person because your base is so broad. But that's where I agree with you, Hutch. Obviously, you take a heap of shit of that in the meantime. But I mean, truthfully, I don't know. We've raised taxes before, and I mean, yeah, it's politically difficult to do, but the Republicans are doing the opposite end of the politically difficult thing, which is, cutting spending for people who really need it. So they're going to take a heap of shit of it. But I don't know. I think that's probably more unpopular than just like increasing people's taxes by 1 percentage point or something. I mean, I guess
we'll find the fuck out, won't we?
Just real quick, like people need to see this. I don't know if I'm sure you guys saw it, but like before we get into our trial here,
okay.
There was
trial would have saved me some characters on this title. I went with intervention because I thought it was
that works too. Yeah.
No, I think trial. Like fuck. I should have went with that. My bad.
We gave you. Hold on. We gave you the thumbnail. It said trial on it.
Can I tell you something? Listen.
We've referred to it as trial multiple times.
I'm multi-fucking-tasking. Okay, Wick. I don't need your sass right now. Don't appreciate it. Okay, you keep that nonsense to yourself.
This is from an article that had multiple sources. I think 2 sources confirmed the story, but Trump was meeting with moderates in the White House today trying to whip these votes to get this reconciliation package done, and this happened. It's fucking unbelievable.
Well, Tally, as the resident Trump voter, would you like to read this out loud and kind of narrate?
Narrate
don't do that. Don't do
that. Sure. You want me to read? I can read.
Please. Yeah, of course.
I'm reading the text of this tweet. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But Trump still doesn't seem to have a firm grasp at what his signature legislative achievement does. According to 3 sources with direct knowledge of the comments, the president told Republicans at this meeting that there are 3 things Congress shouldn't touch if they want to win elections: Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. But we're touching Medicaid in this bill, one member responded to Trump, according to the 3 sources.
This is fucking unbelievable.
Are you shocked at this point? Hold on. Hutch. After all the time we spent with Trump and all the research you've done in Trump,
no, of course it doesn't shock me, but I still have a memory of like this is just something that would have been inconceivable not that long ago, that a president is just like I actually don't think that Trump is lying when he says we're not going to cut Medicaid. I actually don't think he's lying when he says we're only going to do waste, fraud, and abuse.
But what do you mean you don't think he's lying?
I don't think he's lying because I don't think he fucking knows what's
in the bill. You don't think he's being intentionally deceptive. You just think he's wrong.
Yeah, lying.
Yeah. I think he's genuinely he doesn't give a fuck. Like he just wants a win. I think he just wants the bill to pass because he sees it as a win. But it's just inconceivable that a president wouldn't know. I mean, this is a really top line part of this reconciliation bill, these massive Medicaid cuts.
But here's the thing, to be fair to Trump, how loudly did this Republican say that? I can see him saying it under his breath, like, but we're touching Medicaid in this bill, because he doesn't want to be that asshole who contradicts Trump in front of a room full of people. These people, as we're finding out from the whole House budget drama, these people in both chambers are just total pussies when it comes to Trump. I mean, we'll capitulate, throw their principles under the bus. I love seeing Chip Roy and others literally raising their voice on the floor of the Senate. And like, if you give 1 inch on these green new scam subsidies, if you back down 1 inch from what we did, I will not vote for this. And he's definitely gonna fucking vote for it. He's absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you either get fucked in the primary but from Trump, or you get fucked in the general because you did this awful thing that fucked your constituents. So they're
Did you all see the Derek Van Orden tweet? You want to talk about funny fucking tweets? Wait, yes, Wick, did you respond to that? I need to find that tweet.
I quote tweeted it. Like, none of us are whiny little bitches or something like that.
Where is it? You have the guy from The Good Doctor on there.
Yeah.
Okay, let me pull this up. This is pretty funny.
Is that ableism?
No, he's an actor.
But he's betraying someone with autism.
So Derek Van Orden's like, quote, "The president of the United States didn't give us an assignment. We're not a bunch of little bitches around here, okay? I'm a member of Congress. I represent almost 800,000 Wisconsinites."
Fire to you, Wick. Respect.
God,
dude. I just can't, like what? It's like, if you're Chip Roy, I just don't, like, why even pretend? You know what I mean?
Why
be
Chip Roy?
yeah.
Why are you
being Chip Roy? I really don't get it, honestly. Like, every other Republican seems like they're like, look, my constituency, they're just going to have to deal with it. You know, Thomas Massey, I think, probably has some principled objections. Maybe that's it. Maybe Chip Roy's just like, I feel really strongly about this, but I can't do anything about it. Similar to Lisa Murkowski with the amazing couple of days that she's had with like, look, the bill's terrible. I hate the bill. I did vote for the bill, but the bill's terrible, and I hope it changes. And she's
vote
like,
for it.
oh, well, we're under this deadline. And it's like, Murkowski, you said the deadline's artificial. Like, you could have just voted against it. And then, like, a couple of months later, it's a fake deadline. You recognize the deadline's fake, but you're like, we're under this deadline. What's?
Did you see her crash out?
No, it's 50-50. She had the leverage to stop it. She could have just said,
No,
"We don't
exactly,
need to do this."
exactly. Yeah. It's completely ridiculous. I think honestly what it is that I don't know if she's up for I don't think she's up for re-election in 2026, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the other senator from Alaska. My guess is that she and Susan Collins had a conversation, and they're like, look, you're up for re-election sooner. You go ahead and be the one who votes against it, even though they don't need your vote. I'll be the one to take a heap of shit this time. And it's all made up, okay? I thought, you thought you could trust Lisa Murkowski, but you can't. You can never.
Someone in chat said, didn't Murkowski at least get bribed with Alaska's subsidies? No. You know what she got? She got an exemption for, like, there's a stipulation in the bill where I think they're going to withhold funding to states that have a certain error rate when it comes to like Medicaid. And like there's like every state has error rates. I mean, these things happen, like either underpayments or overpayments or whatever. But Alaska is the number one offender. It's like it's like some insane, it's like 25% plus like error rate or something like that. Damn. And she got an exemption for the state of Alaska. That's how they got her to get on board.
Yeah, her rationale is so funny because it's like, to put it in a really crude metaphor, it's like you're voting on whether or not to kick a room full of 50 guys in the nuts individually, and the one person who's the deciding vote is like, well, I made it so that they're not going to kick me in the nuts. They're going to kick all the other 49 guys in the nuts, and that's the end of it. It's like, sometimes we have hard choices, right? And I understand that this isn't going to be fun for everybody, but I had to represent my nuts. And it's like, well, you could have just voted against this and avoided everybody suffering, but she chose not to. So yeah, I don't know, man. I had high hopes for her based on a book tour that she did just a couple of weeks ago. She was talking mad shit about Trump. She was saying that, she might even potentially caucus with the Democrats or become an independent. And I just don't expect that that's going to happen now. If she doesn't have the spine to do this, yeah. So
Murkowski was saying that a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
wow.
So she wrote a memoir, and she's been like on every interview chair, and having really good interviews, like talking about how, she and other Republicans are in this like constant, mist of fear. There are a lot of threats, and she said at one point, she's like, I don't know if Trump's authoritarian, or if that's just how he is. And it's like, what the fuck does that mean? That sort of thing. But she also admitted she didn't vote for him, and yeah, she opened the door to potentially caucusing with the Democrats, or at least becoming independent. But yeah, all that went out the window. So
she's still a Republican, guys. Okay, you can never trust him. Okay, same thing with Mitt Romney. All right, never trusted him a day in my life.
Well, before we get to the trial/intervention, is there anything anyone else has to say about the House bill, which as of this moment, they are inching their way closer and closer to passage, but it has not been passed as of yet.
They're going to get there tonight, probably.
Sure. Yeah. Anybody else? Cool.
Yeah. They're probably going to get there, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. So we have two guests here at Live and Learn. We've got Wick of WhickTV. I mean, a lot of our audiences, not all, but a lot of our audiences probably know definitely who Wick is. But I have a more seasoned, a more tenured, shall we say, demographic who may not know. So, Wick, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we will introduce the...
You're calling your demo like boomers?
I didn't say that, asshole. And I don't appreciate the ageist
seasoned,
adjective
wizened.
there. Like a fine steak.
My demo
like
is boomers.
A fine steak.
I got the boomer demo.
Well, maybe, Hutch. We'll talk about that later.
100%.
Yeah. Before we get to the defendant in the trial, Wick, why don't you introduce yourself?
Certainly. Well, as I said, I'm Wick. I run a show on YouTube, Kick, and Twitch called WhickTV. We do a variety of content, political, cultural, all sorts of things. Sometimes we do more serious shows, right? We had a discussion about the recent injunctions, the universal injunctions that were struck down by the Supreme Court, right? And sometimes we do stuff like, are women evil, right? So it's a big mix, but you can find me on those channels. And
what did you decide on that?
On are women evil? Depends, right?
Ooh,
Depends
Jesus.
which women. Some are.
Okay.
Women.
Well,
can
yeah,
be
find
evil
them at
too. That's just
WhickTV.
feminism. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Wick
that's
TV.
me.
He does debates panels. It's great stuff. It's like every weekday, right? Every weekday.
Well, not every weekday, but we usually do about 3 to 4 a week. Should be fun. Tomorrow we got Loner Box and Soy Pill. They're gonna be debating people on interventionism, right? And
Ooh,
should
the
the U.S.
boner.
be intervening in the world and stage and things like that? That should be fun. So yeah, that's
Gotcha.
me.
All right,
gonna be
before we
good.
get to Tally, one super chat here. So, what kinds of taxes is MAGA okay with besides tariffs? Because it seems like they're just pseudo-libertarians on the issue. P.S. Also, for MAGA, cruelty is the aesthetic. Any quick responses from anybody on that? Tally, Wick, anything before we get to Tally's introduction?
They like taxes on poor people and not rich people. That's pretty much the main distinguishing factor between the Republicans and Democrats for the most part.
And gamblers now, apparently.
Yeah.
There's
All right.
there's a new tax on gambling winnings, I guess. I saw Tim Pool tweet.
I heard
about
Nate Silver bitch about it. Something about
Oh, he's a
taxes
poker
on-
player, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
That's a good thing, though.
all right, Tally, take it away.
Okay, well, I am Tolly Bots. I am Wick's co-host about once a week, sometimes twice a week. We are still kind of figuring out exactly what to call our segment, but we've been having on guests to not necessarily debate, but kind of have discussions on different topics of interest, whether that's sort of current events or like an interesting tweet that an interesting person sent out, and we bring them on to kind of flesh out that idea or what they're thinking about. The origin of this show idea, the trial of Tolly Bots, came from Wick's Discord. So Wick's audience has gotten to know me now for, I guess, a couple of months here, and many of them were surprised to find out that I had voted for Trump in 2024, and they wanted to chat about it. Most of them were like, "Oh, that's so surprising because I really like you." So I was expecting to walk into a bit of a skeptical hug box, people who think I'm a good person, but they just want to figure out how I could have made this mistake. But I'm instead walking into a room of people who don't really know me at all. However, I think this will be fun. I am a viewer of Live and Learn. I watch Hutch and Pisco's streams. Pisco, sorry.
No worries.
Mostly listening to Pisco for the introduction music. It's the best
Yeah,
in town.
fuck yeah.
Yeah,
It's actually
so
him off camera, by the way, playing
Yeah.
playing the
People don't know
strings, yeah.
that.
live.
Yeah.
Very
100%.
impressive.
Mhm.
Very impressive.
He's a Renaissance man.
Yeah, so basically I was a lifelong liberal turned progressive, turned like radical progressive. And I ended up voting for Trump in 2024. I'm not a Republican. I registered, I guess, the beginning of 2024 as an independent. That was my first like official step away from the Democratic Party. I was calling myself a disaffected liberal for a while, and I think that's kind of a good way to encapsulate how I felt. But I see myself as basically having fallen in the center. When I talk to people on the left, they tell me that I'm right wing, and when I talk to people on the right, they tell me that I'm a shit lib. So I don't know. I'm politically homeless. I'm not MAGA. I'm not a Trump supporter. So this is maybe not going to be as fun of an inquisition as you guys would have liked, but I'm open to answer any questions. I'm sure there's lots of things that I haven't thought about, and you guys can call me out on all of that. But I hope this will be a pleasant conversation, at least at some point, because I do like all of you. And at the very least, while I don't think you need to be pining for my vote in any way, you guys are all committed to Democrats succeeding, maybe so that especially that Trump will fail. And so at least maybe I can impart to you one example of someone who was pushed away from the party for various reasons, because that will matter in winning the upcoming elections.
Well,
If I may, just real
Sure.
quick, kind of to almost piggyback on that, one of the things that I want to do with my show and with my advocacy and with my politicking is find people who we lost and who are winnable again, who we can bring back. And I've been talking to Tali for a while, and I think she's someone that has real issues, right, that deserve to be heard. And I think she's winnable back. Like, we can get her back, and people like her back. She's representative in my mind of a class of people that, if we take the right steps, we can get them back. And we need to win, because look at what Trump's doing, right? He's gutted U.S. aid. There's going to be millions of people, right? Millions of deaths because of that. We're looking at an attack on the First Amendment greater than anything we've seen in a generation. We're looking at this god-awful, big, beautiful bill that's going to just gut Medicaid and a lot of harm. So we have to win. And to do that, we have to win people back. People that have, for whatever reason, switched from Biden to Trump. We have to figure out why they did that. We have to hear them out, and we have to see which ones we can win back. And I think Tali is a good example. So that's why I'm advocating for her. So yeah.
I want to piggyback on that too. I think like Wick represents one kind of viewpoint within the left of like, who should we be trying to win? Where should the focus of the coalition be? And I'm like, not to burst Wick's bubble because he's my buddy and my co-host, but I think it would be a fair conclusion for all of you to conclude that you shouldn't spend time winning me back. I think what I've come to realize is, while I'm dispositionally a liberal, you know, you are the type of people I'd rather be hanging out with. I feel like there are some fundamental beliefs that like the left can't get past with me, or I can't necessarily get past with the left. So it'd be interesting if we get to have some of these conversations, but yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to, I said in the conversation that I had when Hutch was on Wick's panel that I'm a winnable voter, and I do view myself that way, especially because, you know, in many ways Trump was a sort of a protest vote for me. And I could see myself voting left, even if just to try to swing the pendulum back in a similar vein of what I did in 2024. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a divide about strategy among the left. And so I don't know that going for people like me is the best move for the Democratic Party, but I'm concerned with like broader cultural trends. And so I see the sort of like fringe horseshoe people that are coalescing on a bunch of these like foreign policy things and sort of populist things as more concerning. And I've like suddenly see myself as like an establishment cuck. So I want the moderates and the sane people of both sides to come out on top. But I don't think those people are going to actually work together. I think those people represent the Democrats and the Republicans in ways that the fringes on the left and the right, their votes are kind of more up for grabs. So I don't know. I hope that made sense.
Well, Hutch, why don't you take it away, buddy, in response to that?
I think a fair point to start the conversation is to ask you two questions. So the first question I want to ask you is, why did you vote for Trump? And that's kind of a two-parter. Were you attracted to some of his policies? If you were, which policies were they? Or were you more repelled by Democrats? And if so, what were some of the things that repelled you away? And then the second question that we need to establish is, do you regret that vote?
So to answer your first question, I had decided, so my ideological turn kind of started in the summer of 2021. So it's been several years now that I had been moving away from the left. I had decided at a certain point that I wasn't going to be voting for the Democrats. I mean, at that point, Joe Biden was still running. I was very concerned about his cognitive decline for a while, as many people were. I'm not saying anything anyone here doesn't know.
Not Josiah.
Okay. Well, so I had basically decided that I wasn't voting.
You said
for
you
the
wanted to have a
Democrats.
pleasant conversation, so I just made it a lot easier. Let me get his ass back in here. Yeah.
So I was like hopeful. I think it must have been like New Year's Eve going into 2024. I remember thinking like Nikki Haley might have a chance here. I was hoping that's who I could end up voting for.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm curious, like
Yes.
the timeline. I was kind of confused. You said summer of 2021. Did you misspeak? Because that was after, that was just a couple months after Biden was inaugurated. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I voted for Biden in 2020.
Okay, by that point, summer 2021, we had successfully passed the AARP, which if you were historically liberal, then I assume you really like that policy, right? But also we had the Delta strain of the coronavirus and then his pullout from Afghanistan. So like what radicalized you against
That
the
was
Democratic
that was
Party?
late. That was late summer. That was September.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we had, the vaccine rollout, which was wildly successful. The economy was opening back up. Was there something, I guess, to Hutch's point, something in particular that the Biden administration did which really rubbed you the wrong way?
No, and I was pushed away first from the left, like my left-wing spaces before I let go of the Democrat title. So the starting point for this was the last kind of war clash between Israel and Gaza, which happened in May 2021. And at that point, I was an activist, like not full time. I was working, but I was protesting in most of my free time. So this was like a year out from summer 2020, and I was still protesting a couple days a week. There was a local BLM chapter, a local Refuse Fascism chapter, a firm, which is like a radical feminist organization. And basically, the protests that I was going to started carrying like Zionism is racism signs, and people were personally asking me to condemn various things that were going on in Gaza. And it was the first time that I realized like these people that I shared a lot of values with and thought that I was aligned with, that it wasn't mutual. Basically, there was like one litmus test that if I didn't pass, that was really going to be it. And granted, I was in very extreme circles, obviously, if Zionism was already a litmus test 4 years ago. But
do you have a personal tie to Israel in any way, or are you just like ideologically in support of them?
Yeah, I mean, I have family there, friends there. I spent a little time living there in college.
I see.
Yeah.
A clearer picture. Oh my God, that froze at the best time for you for a second. Econoboy was. Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing?
I am. He's glitching there. He's
Sorry.
so furious. Like he is glitching.
no.
He's phasing in and out of this dimension into
It
the.
froze
hear
on
me?
him like this for a moment.
Yeah, we can hear you, but you
okay.
like temporarily glitched, such as your rage. I'm
so weird.
curious though, on that particular issue. Like, I'll just take everything you say at face value, but how would you tie that to the Democratic Party? Because I think most people would tell you that President Biden was the most openly and ideologically pro-Zionist president in American history by far, and that was what helped contribute to his low approval rating and what would have probably doomed him had he stayed in the race. At least one of the factors is that it seemed like he was committed to giving Netanyahu a hand no matter what. So if that was the deciding factor, why would that play a role?
Okay, so that was not the deciding factor. I was just taking you guys back to the very beginning of my ideological journey, and it was a slow one. This took several years.
Okay.
So again, it was only about a year ago. I didn't decide even that I was going to vote for Trump until pretty close to the election. I didn't know. I had decided that I wasn't voting for Biden, and then that I wasn't voting for Kamala. And again, we can sort of like get into.
Why not vote for Biden? Like, at what point did you make your mind up that you were definitely not going to vote for President Biden after voting for him in 2020?
It's hard to put a. It's hard to put an exact.
Give us like the top 5. Like, give us like the concise. Like, what are the? If you had to boil it down to like 5 things that really repelled you, what would you say?
Sure. So I wasn't repelled necessarily and specifically from the Democratic Party. This is the answer that you guys all like stomped your feet about last time, that you're going to hate the answer, that it was a lot of vibes. And when I say vibes, I mean culture. I mean like what I'm seeing amongst people and the health of our society and things of this nature. So I went on an ideological journey that sort of started with this sort of Israel stuff and me being a Zionist and being called a racist and all of these things. And realizing what I saw, that there was hypocrisy in the anti-racism sphere on the left. Okay. And this took me on a journey of different pillars of things that I sort of held dear. Things, you know, things like sexism, racism, gender stuff, all of these things that I started to tackle and open my mind to. This is a hard thing to narrate, right? Because it's so easy to like cling on to one thing. It's like, so why did that one thing push you away? But my ecosystem of who I was listening to and what I was listening to changed, right? And so I stopped watching MSNBC and CNN, and I was listening more to podcasts, and not right-wing people. I was listening to like heterodox liberals, basically, like liberals who were saying things that were a little bit outside the norm on wokeism and stuff like that. So people like Jesse Singal and Katie Herzog, and these gentlemen aren't necessarily liberals, but sort of libertarians like Michael Moynihan and Camille Foster and Matt Welch. And
Before you go on any further, can we just can we get the chat to just can we get you guys
I'm not
to chill
even looking.
Okay, can we get you guys to just chill the fuck out though? Like, it's fine if you disagree with people, but Jesus fucking Christ. But all right, so go ahead.
Well, I have a comment, but go ahead.
No, yeah. Wait, you were gonna say something there, Wick?
Well, I'll let her finish, and then we'll get into it. The comment will keep. This is a good example of what I feel is a problem. But go ahead.
Maybe I'll just try to.
For the record,
I'll try to sum it up, and you guys can ask me lots of little questions, because otherwise this narrative could take a really long time.
Sure.
The one thing that I think Tim Pool gets right, is that in our modern sort of political ecosphere, what determines whether you are on the left or on the right is what you believe to be true about the world. So if you guys recall in his conversation with Kaya, she was saying like, a center liberal, maybe kind of edgy for a left-wing person to say things, and he was like, oh, you're right-wing, you're conservative, and she pushed back vociferously against that, which is, I used to push back against that for a long time too, until I realized it's not fair for me to push back because I actually do think different from these people, right? But basically there's like fundamental things that I believe to be true now that I didn't before, or vice versa.
What is
things
the role
like
of, sorry,
what are some of those fundamental things?
So
I feel like I could guess a few. Like, did you cringe when you heard people say that, you know, you can't be racist against white people? Is that like maybe one of the things?
Yes, but again,
Okay.
I can't emphasize enough, after years of saying that myself, after saying that you can't be racist against white people. And so these were things that I believed for a long time. But yes, I took a lot of issue with what I saw as racism in the anti-racism movement. I was listening to people like John McWhorter and Coleman Hughes, people who were pushing for like a colorblind approach to racism in America.
You should probably steer away from Coleman Hughes, just for the record. He gets really basic facts wrong. Like, he tried to claim that Martin Luther King did not advocate for reparations, and he confidently said that when he was on The View, and he could not be more wrong. Like, there are so many explicit quotes of him calling for that. So I just want to try to steer you away from him. He seems a bit silly.
I think he's really thoughtful. I remember that interview. I don't remember him saying that specific thing. If he got that wrong, that is a big thing. But he
did, and it was shockingly wrong. Like, anybody in the chat, just look up, did Martin Luther King advocate for reparations? There are dozens of quotes of him calling for it. Yeah.
Okay, so an example is that you can't be racist against white people, and you find that cringe. I'm just trying to tie that to the inevitable voting decision. Obviously, we have to get more context. So let's get some more accountable. You had some questions for her as well?
Not really any questions. I mean, obviously, I disagree with the line of thought really that she has. But I mean, of course, that's the case. We voted differently. But in general, like Josiah said, right? So I tie that into actually voting for Trump in 2024. Like, what was the hope? Like, what was the hope that essentially, like, what did you hope to accomplish by doing that? And do you think that over the last 6 months that has in some way been accomplished, or, you know, kind of walk us through that?
So, I mean, as I stated earlier, I part of this was a sort of protest vote to a certain extent. I live in a very blue state. My state has only gone red twice ever in the presidential election. That was for Nixon and the second Reagan term. So I knew there was a very good chance that my vote was not going to influence the outcome of the election. And if my state flipped, then, well, I wouldn't be the only person held responsible, obviously, in that case. Am I thrilled with what I've seen over the last 6 months? No.
Is it what
I
you
see,
expected?
I don't really know what I expected. No, it's not what I expected, but I didn't have very high expectations either. What I saw was essentially a coalition of people, some people who shared like some of my views, and what I saw as like a sort of a larger movement that I could see myself in. It didn't seem to be like the same Republican Party that it had been. There were, autistic, transhumanist, socially liberal people, business people all coalescing around with more traditional conservatives and, evangelicals and things of this nature. And yeah, I mean,
For specific examples, I'm curious, did you like RFK Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard? Like, were those people that, they were not part of the conventional Republican coalition? They backed Trump. They have high-ranking positions in Trump's administration. Are those like kind of like North Stars you look to, that this was a heterodox movement, and so you had more confidence in it?
No, and those are figures that people in that sort of heterodox space like, but no, I never really liked Tulsi. There are a lot of people in the heterodox space who seem to have like formed personal relationships with her and say very nice things about her personally, but I never really grew an admiration for her. Same with RFK. I mean, no, I was never a supporter of RFK Jr. I was surprised though, because there were a lot of people who I thought were like reasonable people just in my life or in my online circles and stuff who were supporting him. But no,
To help us out, because obviously we don't know the people in your personal life. Is there anybody that we might know online or whatever reputationally that like was sympathetic to Trump or supported Trump, and so you would like refer to them like, okay, like this creates a permission structure for me to walk away from the Democrats and vote for Trump, like Dave Smith? Like I'm just trying to get some like contextual markers here to help us navigate this.
Yeah, Dave Smith I see as like my polar opposite politically, and polar opposite of, that's Dave Smith represents a movement that I'm concerned about. Not just his movement. There are several movements that I'm concerned about across the right and the left, but no. So honestly, a lot of the sort of influencer people that I follow didn't vote for Trump. So some of them basically, they were also disaffected with the left. And I know some of them did. I know some of them held their nose voting for Kamala. That's how they felt about it, in the same way that I sort of held my nose voting for Trump the person, because he's someone that I mean, really detested for a long time. I was also really desensitized to all of the messaging about Trump.
What do you mean by that?
I guess all of the media
Trump's
that
a
I
Nazi,
consumed,
Trump to this, Trump to that. Is that what you mean?
Sure, right. Starting from his first term, and then leading up into the 2024 election, and just like this is democracy is on the line basically, and Trump is Hitler, and these things I think desensitized a lot of people.
I was
to be
going to
honest,
Josiah was saying, who in the influencer class, excluding your family and friends. I'm going to ask you about your friends and family. I remember back in 2015, 2016, I was writing some articles basically saying that, because there were a bunch of people, I don't know if you remember, like criticizing people who wore sombreros who weren't Hispanic, and people who were like talking about costumes and stuff. Anyway, I was like writing articles and saying like, hey, we should like do free speech, and it should be like not this racial thing. And I was kind of against that identity politics. I remember very vividly.
Good for you.
Thank you. Like people in my orbit who I consider my friends, like I was like losing a couple friends. They were
Yeah.
like, "You're an Uncle Jose," like because
Yeah.
I'm Hispanic, and they're like, so why are you doing this? Why are you siding with these people? You know, people call me contrarian sometimes. But anyway, my point is, did you lose any friendships? You know, people around you. Do you recall moments like of your feeling ostracized or things like that?
You mean after voting for Trump, or?
No. Like in this lead up, because you're describing a kind of like an imprecise moment. It's not like really policy based or like a specific policy. And you're literally saying it's vibes based. And you're bringing up multiple times like the people in my orbit, the circles I was in, the places where I was protesting. I was hearing things I didn't like. And so I'm asking you about that. Like, was there a feeling of ostracization that like from personal dynamics, personal relations, people you work with, people that you see?
Yes, certainly. And again, most of that happened up front and before I, like, at least a year, probably 2 years before I was really done. 2 years, maybe closer to 3 years before I was really done with the left. So yes, I lost, none of them were like close best friends, thankfully. I found that most of the people closest to me, well, first of all, I grew up with a lot of Jews. Okay, so most of the people that I grew up, I'm from New York. Most of the people that I grew up with were the same liberal Zionists, basically, that I was. But I lost all of my activist friends, and that's like a silly term, but this was real life, right? This wasn't just like this wasn't internet activism.
What did you guys fight about? What happened? Like, why'd you have a falling out with them?
She was a Zionist.
Yeah, I was a Zionist. I wouldn't
Did you talk about that? Was that like?
Wait, you should define what Zionist means, because some people say it means something. Like, what do you mean when you say that term? Sorry, Pisco. I just wanted to.
Yeah.
That I believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state.
Okay.
And then was this something that like that you guys were talking about a lot, or something that it was a sticking point?
So there was a. It's silly to call it a war now in hindsight compared to what's going on right now in Gaza, but there was a small war. There was an exchange of fire. If you remember the word like Sheikh Jarrah and all of that stuff was going on, and there were a bunch of missiles that were launched into Israel, and then a bombing campaign for several weeks in Gaza. And the groups that I was part of just reacted to this. Like there were marches that were taking place in my city, from my city to Gaza, from here to Al-Aqsa, the march to end colonization. And so I didn't pretend I wasn't a Zionist. I didn't, and people already knew this. And at this point in time, I already knew that there was an issue with being a Zionist on the left in my progressive circles. But it was something that I mostly ignored. I didn't talk about that much. And I was like, I just felt confident that like this wouldn't be some determining factor, that this wasn't going to end up being some litmus test that suddenly, like if nothing else changes about you, that's it. Yeah.
Do you think that I feel like I'm connecting some dots here, but if you're hanging out with activists, that's already a group that is going to skew probably well to the left of the median Democratic voter. Like the median Democratic voter does not want Israel to not exist, but maybe the median activist in your circles absolutely did. Mm-hmm. Do you think that maybe you started to conflate your activist friends with like the Democratic Party broadly?
So I hear you, and like possibly, and I know that's part of Wick's theory, and sure, probably to a certain extent. But I never really I never believed that the Democratic Party, like, so for example, there are always Jews who have felt that the Democratic Party, right-wing conservative Jews, whatever, who have felt that the Democratic Party is bad for Israel for decades, right? I always thought that was complete nonsense. I still think that's mostly nonsense. Like moving forward, whatever the next iteration of a Democratic administration would look like. So I didn't vote because of Israel. Like that wasn't what I voted about. And again, I didn't see like the Democrats as evil. And I agree with you. The people that I was interacting with were on the extreme. the way that I view the world just kind of changed. And yeah,
Can you give us an
that's what I
example?
see. It's
So
like
one thing you believed before this shift and that you no longer believe. So you mentioned anti-racism. There's racism and anti-racism. Give us another example. Just to, I feel like we're going everywhere. We're just hitting like XYZ, but
It's like a
we
constellation.
gotta
Yeah.
focus, right? We gotta focus in. So give us a specific example that we can kind of latch onto and maybe discuss, right? Of a thing that you believed about the world before that you no longer believe, or a thing that you didn't believe then and
but now do.
now do. Yes, thank you.
Sure. So let's give like the James Damore example, basically. I think most of the discrepancies that we see, that we see between the sexes in different domains of work and achievement and preferences, basically, that I think most of this comes down to differences, evolutionary, biological, and psychological differences between the sexes. I don't think that these things are bad things. And the type of liberalism that I want, the type of liberal that I see myself as, is every single person should actually have access to do whatever they want to do. I don't want anyone to be restricted from doing anything because of their sex or gender or race, religion, all of the obvious things. But I have come to resent the amount of time that I feel that the left spends on trying to reach some type of representative outcome.
Like an equilibrium.
Demographically representative outcome. Yeah. I don't think it will ever happen. I don't think it's a worthwhile mission.
So when Joe Biden said, for example, I'm going to select a woman to be my vice presidential nominee. I'm going to select a black woman to be on the Supreme Court. Did you resent that, prior to voting for him, or did you notice it? Or are you saying that it bothered you more after the fact, or you noticed it more after the fact? When I say after the fact, I mean post inauguration.
Right. So again, my ideological turn started after Joe Biden was inaugurated. Right. So
do you remember thinking about that in the moment and being like, why is Joe Biden saying we're going to pick a woman?
No, Pisco. I was like, hell fucking yeah, we're gonna have a black woman in the Oval Office.
What about with justice?
And I still feel that way. Like I still yeah. I mean,
how do you reconcile that?
Because it doesn't need to be forced. I actually think it's very easy to reconcile. There
but it was,
are plenty
right?
of competent. Well, that's the point. That's actually what I was about to say. Is he could have just done that and not said anything. He could have just done that. He could have just done it, right? You can just select a super competent, black woman, for example.
Well, he was asked the question, and that answer to his question was probably really important to a lot of voters. So
right, it was in advance. I don't want to say a virtue signal, but a signal of some sort to try to rally, various groups and demographics to come out and vote for him. But to your point, right, there's not a strict hierarchy in terms of anybody who's ever hired, especially for a mass position where you have dozens of applicants, or in the case of a Supreme Court justice or vice president, hundreds of potential candidates. It's not like a total linear thing. You almost have tiers of competence. It's hard to say this person is emphatically more competent or more experienced, has a better resume than this person, than this person, than this person, like a rank ordered list. And so to your point, right, I agree, it's easy to reconcile. If you say that you're going to pick a black woman as your vice president or as a Supreme Court justice, there are probably dozens or hundreds, maybe thousands, depending on the field, right? Maybe more, who have the resume. I mean, Ketanji Brown Jackson has the best resume in terms of her work experience than any of the Supreme Court justices, from Alito to Thomas to Amy Coney Barrett, certainly superior to any of the Trump nominees. And she also happens to be a black female. So I agree, it's easy to reconcile. But I guess Piso was curious, I think the crux of his question was, okay, well, if you were concerned about, this emphasis on equity, how did that manifest in the Democratic Party's policies such that you were driven away from voting for them and voting for the Republicans?
Where previously you voted for them, right? So the heyday of this it feels like the high watermark.
But I was
of this
bought
ideology
into
was,
that.
Right.
Because I've had a sincere ideological shift. That's what I'm trying to express. Really.
As I'm understanding, you might agree with my characterization, perhaps, that the high watermark was pre-2020 election, but you feel like you were in that and you were a supporter of it and hence the movement away from that afterwards. So in retrospect, it's not a contradiction for you because you've changed your mind and now you don't have this view of the equity or forced diversity or whatever. Do you feel like the Zionism aspect of it like led you to question it, like what you were seeing with your protester friends, that was causing you to re-examine stuff? When did this come, or was it like you mentioned, going and listening to a bunch of podcasts and hearing this message? Do you track it like that, or is it you're not sure of the causality?
So again, I track it in the beginning as like starting to listen to podcasts, and even that was really slow because like the Blocked and Reported podcast is the one that I was mentioning before with Jesse Singal and Katie Herzog. Are any of you guys familiar with that podcast?
Yes, I am.
Loosely.
Okay.
Not
Okay.
really.
No,
Well,
I've never even
I
heard
know
of it.
Jesse Singal pisses off a lot of
Oh,
people.
I know Jesse
about trans.
Singal.
They do a lot of
I know
a lot of
Jesse
trans
Singal, yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay, and I was listening to a ton, just like going through the archives of the Intelligence Squared debates. So I went through like a bunch of their British debates, and then I found out that they have, Intelligence Squared in the US, which is now called Open to Debate. They're still going, and I still subscribe to that. And so that was like transformative for me in many ways, because what I felt when I was exposing myself to some of these debates was that I had never really heard the best faith arguments from the other side on many of these things. And some of these things were ideas that I had held closely, and others were things that I hadn't thought much about, but were taboo in some way. And it just came away feeling like I don't need, like I need to think more deeply about a lot of these things, basically. And so it's like I got rid of my presets to a certain extent. And so I don't automatically.
You were used to criticisms that sounded like, oh, they just hate trans people because they're bigots or whatever. They are, Donald Trump.
Yeah,
hates
they're
black
obsessed
people,
with
whatever.
people's
And
genitals.
then you heard these different takes that
Absolutely.
explained it in a different way, and it got you to question, like, wait a second, I used to think that, and that kind of like, yeah, I can kind of see where the wheels are turning here. Makes sense. Like, what are some of the examples of?
There's
like,
a super. Can I just real quick? There's a super chat
Yeah.
directed at Tally from Doobie. It says, "Why does it matter which party or president would be quote better for Israel? Shouldn't we be voting for a president or party that is better for Americans?"
Yeah, so
I don't think she said that. She said the
if you were
opposite, that she
listening,
didn't vote for
Doobie, I
Israel.
said the exact opposite. Yeah, that I don't think. Well, first, maybe I didn't make it explicit that I don't think Americans should be voting based on Israel, but I did make it explicit that was never what my vote was about.
Got it. So go ahead, Hutch.
So give me an example, because I think we're still trying to get a handle on like the shift to like what it looks like. So like, I know there are certain things that really trigger the fuck out of me. Like chat can stun lock me with a few different takes, like any kind of like saying that Bernie was like robbed of the nomination in 2016. I'll fucking rant for like 2 hours on this, and I'll argue with chat or whatever. So like, what are the current takes you hear from the left that trigger the fuck out of you? You sounded pretty triggered when you came into the Wick panel, like for example. So like, I can't remember what we were talking about. But, like,
Oh,
that
You sounded
activated.
triggered.
Not triggered, but
So the one about violence on during
triggered as
protests.
hell.
Yeah.
Typical male feminist sexist language.
Yeah.
No, I didn't mean I get triggered. I mean like it got you like upset.
I was hysterical, histrionic. Yes.
I wondered if you were. No, never mind. I'm sorry.
Through a tampon.
So yeah, I mean, Charlie and the other gentleman whose name I forget were advocating for political violence, basically. So yes, I resent that tremendously. And this is an issue, obviously, not just on the left. I actually think, if anything, this used to be more the domain of the right. That seems to be increasing on the left, and that's very concerning to me. But yeah, like people saying that we can replace property, but we can't replace people. Well, are you going to replace that person's property? Are you going to fix up that business? Are you going to employ all those people who are impacted? So that type of rhetoric angers me and triggers me. Not I guess not doesn't make me cringe so much. The stuff that makes me cringe is like America is a white supremacist nation.
I mean, I don't. Let's just. I feel like we're kind of none of this. I think one of the issues I have and we've heard this. I don't know. I've just heard this from a lot of people who decided not to vote for Democrats or vote for Trump or sit it out or whatever. Is this kind of like vague gesture towards a lot of culture war issues, like, oh, I had a lot of changes of opinion. I think the equity stuff is cringe. I had bad experiences with activist spaces. Like, this is an entirely ordinary story for why people turn their back on the Democratic Party. The big problem that I see in that from hearing that from so many people, is that isn't to even like a close degree, I think, representative of the actually existing Democratic Party. Do you see some people in the Democratic Party who will parrot some of these talking points? I mean, certainly I do think so. Well, I was just going to say that I think so, right? But when we look at take Joe Biden
Look
as a
at the
perfect example.
DNC. Look
Well,
at the
no,
DNC.
Tally, give
They
me 1
just kicked
second.
out David Hogg because they had to
Yeah.
like realign with their new
Well, I'm just
gender
going to say,
requirements.
take Joe Biden as, and I think that's
There he goes.
a misleading understanding of that.
There I go.
I was going to say, Hutch.
Am I
can you-
okay?
Yeah,
I'm
we
okay.
can hear you.
You're good,
You're
you're
good,
good.
bro. You're
Okay.
good,
Okay.
man. Yeah.
He blamed me. It was him the whole time.
Shut up.
Hold on,
California
Holly just
internet.
said something really important, right? Like something.
no, she
that we've
didn't.
Been
I
trying to
didn't
get
even
these.
finish-
Hold on,
Okay.
go ahead.
No,
please.
go for
Your
it.
show. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just going to say that I think Joe Biden is a good example of this, right? That, during the summer of love, when we had all these riots going on, all these protests and stuff, like this was at the same time that there were a lot of Democratic movement of like defund the police and stuff like that. You got Joe Biden out there saying we're not going to defund the police. He was the nominee of the Democrats. To my understanding, he didn't defund the police.
More importantly, they
didn't.
didn't. More importantly, they didn't.
Yeah.
To Econoboy's point, legislation like the American Rescue Plan expanded resources and funding.
Yeah,
funded
in the
the
summer of
shit out of the
2020,
police.
in the summer of
$100 million.
2021, I was one of the people saying that defund the police doesn't go far enough. We need to abolish the police.
Yeah.
Those were the signs that I was.
No, I get that,
carrying out.
Tally. I get that. I'm just saying.
So
Joe
I
Biden
wasn't-
was the
I
most
wasn't-
recent.
yeah.
Yeah, Joe Biden was the most recent democratically elected Democratic nominee. After that, we had Kamala Harris, who all of the Biden delegates voted for Kamala unanimously. And to me, look, I mean, again, there were some people on the far left that hated Kamala Harris, whatever, but she was getting huge rallies. There was a lot of enthusiasm behind her campaign. It turned out not to be enough. When you look at the polling, for instance, like socialists, people who identify as socialists, 95% of those people voted for Kamala Harris. Like, I just don't find a sufficient reason to say, well, I had some moderating opinions on social issues and activist spaces really turned me off. And so that's a reason why I voted for Trump. To the extent that we care about racism, bigotry, a colorblind approach, I don't think voting for the guy that made and I will say Nazi, his deputy chief of staff, Stephen Miller. I don't.
Wait,
I don't. No, stop. Please go. Shut the fuck up. Okay, shut the hell up. Okay, no. Oh, he's Jewish. He can't be a Nazi bigot. Sure, Pisco. Sure.
You could
no,
just
right?
you
The
could
guy
use
hasn't
like
said-
you
guy
could
who
use
wants
lots
to
of other
denaturalize-
effective
No,
words.
And Pisco,
but
I don't even know if historically.
I don't know, but you're
disagree with that label,
presupposing that she's
Stephen
saying that
Miller.
her vote is rational. I mean, she's describing a story that I don't know. Do you think that your vote was rational, Tali? She's not saying that she had a reason, like a rational reason.
There goes
Are you
Pisco.
saying
I'm
that-
sorry, Tally. I just want to apologize.
hope-
Every time a
I'd-
woman's
Wow.
in chat, Pisco accused her of being irrational. So I
Irrational.
apologize
No.
for
She's
that.
not saying that
Fucking
it was
unbelievable, bro.
But you're saying
No, I
what
agree.
was the
I'm
reason
saying very
to vote?
explicitly,
She's
it
not
wasn't a
descri-
calculated. It was right. It was not a
Yes.
calculated policy decision at all.
You
No.
said it was a protest vote, which is to
Yes,
me.
so hold on.
When someone, if I could just finish, when someone says protest vote, I take that to mean that, like, for instance, the uncommitted movement, right? That was a protest decision, whether they voted for Trump or a third party or they decided not to vote. They said the logic that I'm employing is by withholding my vote from the Democratic Party, I'm hoping to push them further towards a certain direction, right? And that's, to me, a rational decision, even
that's
though
not what
the
protest
So you're not
protest-
talking to her
That's
though.
not
I
what-
mean, you're not
that's
talking to
not
those
what
people. You're
protest
talking
vote
to
But
Tali.
also-
I'm using.
Hold on.
I'm using
But
that as
to
an
be fair,
example.
to be fair,
Okay.
that was
That's all I'm asking.
that was in a non-organized way, right? As in, I wasn't part of a movement or going green or something like this. That was essentially my rationale. Was like, I want the Democrats to have a really big wake-up call. You know, like
You
if
wanted
this
them to
goes the
lose.
way that I think it's going, and I thought
Because
he
she
was
didn't like
gonna,
them.
I thought he was gonna win, and that was. I had never been right about an election outcome that Trump had run in before. So I thought he was going to win. And I was just like, if this does happen, I want a message to land on the Democrats that
What did you hope the
Something is
Democrats would
wrong.
learn from this? How do you think that they should change? Because this is sending me, right? You guys, it's maybe I speak disaffected liberal, and you guys don't. I don't know. But when someone says that they're protest vote, it's not because they want to push someone in a different direction. The protest vote is, I don't like the Democrats. I'm going to protest against them by voting for the other guy. So it's not so much that she voted for Trump, it's she voted against the Democrats, right? At least that's what I understand from the talks we have had. So my question, though, for you, Tali, is what do you hope that the Democrats will learn from this? How do you want them to change? Because you've talked to me before about you're a winnable voter. And let's just get to the brass tacks of this, right? Instead of circling around it, what would the Democrats need to do? What policy positions or vibes or the way they treat others, the culture around it, what needs to change to get you to come back to the Democratic Party?
Well, again, not to burst your bubble, but what I said at the top of the show is something that I have been thinking about lately is like, I don't know that
So if
the
there's nothing you can do, that if there's nothing we can do, that's an answer, right? And you can say that answer, right?
It's
That's
not that there's nothing the
perfectly fine.
Democratic Party could do. Basically, essentially, so because I don't feel really motivated by either party, you know, I'm
Okay.
disaffected, disillusioned to a certain extent. I don't feel like all that much changes materially in my life between these administrations, which was something that comforted me throughout the Trump years, that we have a big bureaucracy basically, and fortunately and unfortunately, administrations kind of yo-yo back and forth. And so, I mean, I could vote. I see myself voting for the left. The first thing that I see myself voting for the left, the reason motivating that would be the concern that I have about the fringes on the right, basically.
Okay,
So like now that I'm
basically,
spending more
whichever side
time
is
in
worse,
right
you'll
wing.
vote against them. Is that kind of your motivation?
Yeah.
Whatever side you
Yes,
feel
because I'm
as
not highly
worse,
motivated
whatever you
toward
mean by
either side.
worse is the side you'll vote against. And rather
Yeah,
than voting for something, you're voting against something. I think this happens a lot, right? So you're not the first
Yeah.
person I've heard that says something like this, right? You're not the first person I've talked to that says, well, I don't really care about Trump or anything, but the Democrats can't win because X, Y, or Z, right? Or the Democrats were mean to me, so X, Y, and Z, I'm going to vote against them. So I'm going to stay home and things like that. So I guess like what are you voted? You're saying these fringe and extremes, right? What do you mean?
On the right.
Yeah, what do you mean? Be specific, please.
Sure. So when I say like vibes, right, and I'm talking about cultural vibes, and
You mentioned Dave
what I
Smith. Are you talking about the Dave Smith types, the woke right types? What are you talking about? Like, we don't have to
Yeah,
talk about vibes. We don't have to go in circles. You could just tell me.
Sorry, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about Tucker Carlson. I'm
Okay.
concerned about Candace Owens. I'm concerned about Dave Smith. I'm concerned about Daryl Cooper. I'm concerned about the apparatus of people who I think they're well-meaning people caught up in
Okay,
that group.
the through line there is anti-Zionism, anti-Israel position. I know that that's not why you didn't vote, and I believe you when you say that. But that is the through line. And when you
I
talk
don't
about
see the
extremism,
through line.
like,
No, I see
You don't?
anti-Americanism. I see historical revisionism as the through line there. I see
Holocaust denial.
I see tendency toward fascism in Holocaust denial.
which you
across
don't
the
see,
board
which you
there.
don't see in Trump. I mean, really, think about it. Which you don't see in Trump.
So I not
In terms of
to
his- yeah, go
not
for
to hitch hutch to this claim, but kind of what Trump was saying in the beginning, where that he like believes Trump when he says he doesn't intend to cut Medicaid. I don't think Trump is ideological. I think I sort of believe the notion that came out of the first administration, which is he kind of listens to the last person in the room, and that's not a stable.
But the administration is
way to
ideological. I
run
mean, you want to talk
things.
about fascism, you want to about
Sure, yeah.
authoritarianism. Like, you must recognize. I mean, we just have a lawsuit from Kilmar Berger Garcia where he's detailing what happened on his way to Sikot, where he's being tortured. You know, he's being tortured, and for weeks, the administration's official policy was basically to demean this person and to ignore the law. So, I mean,
Yeah,
you must
concerns me
acknowledge that-
greatly.
I mean,
Yes.
it concerns you greatly, but it
Yes.
doesn't raise the same kind of fascism concerns that, like, I don't know, Dave Smith. I mean, Dave Smith strikes you as more of a fascist than what I just
Tucker
described.
Carlson, Daryl Cooper. So Wick points out Dave Smith, and Dave Smith again is like is that center. He's like the middle of the horseshoe that kind of brings together the left-wing people who kind of fall into that space and the right-wing people who fall into that space. He's somewhat of a separate
through
case
line
here.
among these various different thinkers that you're thinking, who you say represent the fringes of the Republican Party. By the way, I agree with you. Actually, I think that they are the fringe in the sense that they are not the and we've talked about this too. And I think we talked about with Conboy and Josiah that the majority of the party probably isn't represented by the Tuckers of the world. But you mentioned them. The through lines of the speakers that you mentioned of the extremes are like fascism and like historical revisionism. This is the raison d'etre, I think, of the current administration, which is represented by like the actual government officials.
Right, and I just want to piggyback off that, and by saying I agree that Trump is not a particularly deep thinker. He's not particularly well read. He's not a fascist ideologically in the sense that he's not staying up all night reading Giovanni Gentile or anything like that. But he deeply believes and embodies some of the worst elements of fascism, like being at the center of a cult of personality, wanting to maximize power, wanting to crush dissent in ways we've simply never seen, certainly from the Democratic Party, but even from the pre-Trump Republican Party. So I would encourage you to look at it as you shouldn't give him any points by simply saying, oh, he's kind of a blank slate and kind of a doofus, right? Because it is precisely because of his personality defects and deficits that we are in this situation. And he is influenced by more philosophically ingrained, smarter fascists and authoritarians, like, again, the Stephen Millers, for example. I think that there is this reflex among Trump voters, and you seem to imply it there, maybe you don't believe it, to absolve Trump of this, but this would not work without him. He is the primary cause of it, and this is a very authoritarian second administration so far, quite frankly, not just for the reasons Pisco provided, but that Wick did at the beginning during his intro, talking about the First Amendment violations that we've never seen from the Democratic Party or anything else.
Hey, I mean, so if we want to talk about transformational texts and things that I read along my journey, The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff was extremely impactful for me, and it really reflective of what I see as sort of real issues in our culture. And that's why it's like easy to say, oh, vibes, and like minimize it. But when we're talking about the coddling of the American mind and the way that this is influencing people's mental health and how that's influencing their physical health and all of these things I see as interconnected and things that I am really concerned about, basically.
Vitali, you say vibes, right? So we're not dismissing it as vibes. Yeah, you say vibes.
No. I say vibes, but that's where I was about to get into a tangent and Wick cut me off, which is fair enough. But I say vibes in the way that like there are some kind of like schizo people on YouTube who talk about vibes, and it's not just like they're talking about a different type of analysis, cultural analysis. It's not just like this is how I feel today and I didn't eat breakfast. And I feel like that's sometimes the way that you guys talk about it, and that's fine. And some people, I guess, probably do vote that way, but I am talking a little like yeah.
And has the culture gotten better? I mean, like, so you say, you're looking at from a different mode of analysis. I feel like the culture's gotten worse. Yeah. So to get a Hutch's question, do you regret your vote?
I'm not happy with the way things are going. It seems I have a few things to say about regret. Number one, my vote didn't elect Trump.
Yeah, I know, but what I mean to say, like, you can still feel a sense of personal responsibility in that, even if you acknowledge the reality, which is that there's no causal link between your vote and the outcomes. You could have not gone.
Yeah, it's not outcome determinative.
But people still feel guilty about things because it's a signaling and internal. I mean, that's presumably the reason you went to vote in the first place, right? Your protest vote is just as unlikely to affect the outcome as any other vote. A vote in and of itself is very unlikely to. But you voted anyway. You voted anyway because you find some value there as a signaling mechanism or whatever you want to define it for yourself. And on that basis, do you regret it?
Maybe kind of like. I think, shoot, I had something that I was going to, so someone, I'm assuming it's a audience member of one of yours, but was like asking me questions about this last night on Twitter. And I don't know how I realize this might not be relevant to you, but it is sort of to me is like, this was actually the first election that I was not proselytizing, where I was not telling people go out and vote for my guy, make sure you vote, I wasn't encouraging people to vote for Trump. It was something that I kept to myself, except for on Twitter, basically, and like Twitter is really disconnected from my real life.
Totally. I'm granted you probably didn't have the big impact on the election. I'm granting you that. None of us did, right? But just be like, if you look in your heart, do you feel like that you regret that you voted for him?
Can I maybe?
I don't
well,
know,
you
and
know,
I'm not. Hold on, let me just.
I
I'm
want-
not trying to be difficult. I don't want to lie and just be like, yes, I regret it so much. So like,
Sure, don't lie.
Richard
Yeah.
Richard Hanania has written about he really regrets his vote, and I relate to a lot of the stuff he's saying. And I'm like, Richard Hanania is one of the people that I really like ideologically. Him, Brad Palumbo. I relate to the things that he's saying. Like, I don't feel overcome with regret. Like, again, I could give an answer that would make me like more socially desirable in this setting.
I'm not asking for
No,
that,
yeah,
no.
we're
I know
wanting the
you're
truth.
not.
And you
I
gave
know
it.
you're not, and
Yeah,
I'm just trying to be honest. Yeah,
I'm-
I'm not
but I
happy
want-
with what's going on, but like, I don't know how meaningful regret is. I
Let's
don't know.
do let's
I
do
wanna-
let's do
I wa-
Hutch, then Econoboy, then Wick.
I want to put my big boy hat on for a minute here.
Big boy hat.
There was an estimate that came out today that said that 14 million people across the world are going to die by 2030 because of these USAID cuts. The Republicans are on the precipice of signing a bill into law that could kick 17 million people off of Medicaid, over a quarter of Medicaid recipients. These are poor families. These are children that are going to be kicked off of this. And I'm not trying to moralize right now, but you said something before that stuck with me. It's one of the things that triggers me. You said that you felt like not much meaningfully changes between a Democratic president switched to a Republican, back and forth, back and forth. I don't know how you could possibly reach that conclusion faced with those kind of staggering numbers.
So those are bad things.
No, those are
Those are-
catastrophic things. 14
Yes,
million dead.
yes.
Those are catastrophic
So
things.
Hutch, I agree with you, but I'm very hesitant about predictive numbers like this because we just don't know. And I've seen things even just in this past, like in the Gaza war, of estimations of like a certain date and a certain time that we're going to reach a certain threshold of starvation or of famine, or predictions of deaths that don't necessarily come true. There could be other things. Maybe basically what I'm saying is, if that is the outcome, yes, that is horrific, absolutely horrific, bad.
But can we also, just to clarify to Hutch's point, he's saying it's horrific, but it is a direct consequence. That is 100% the fault of Trump and the Republican Party, not the Democrats. His point is, so I take your skepticism notwithstanding, let's assume the figures he cited are true or likely to be true. That's not Joe Biden. That's not woke activists on Twitter. That is literally 100.00% Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And that is a meaningful difference between the two parties and the two administrations. And can you address that? Like he's not asking you, of course you find it horrific, but are you now 6 months in recognizing, oh shit, there are meaningful differences between a Donald Trump in power versus a Democrat in power?
You were speaking to like your concerns with the fringes on the right, and Pisco was right that one through line was this like staunch opposition to Israel. Another through line is nationalism, hyper nationalism. These people are isolationists, they're nationalists, which means you are patriotic to the point where it is detrimental to the world around you. This is like the USAID cuts. That is, you're speaking sort of in the abstract about your concerns about the fringes. This is
No, you're absolutely right. That type of
consequence
anti-interventionism
of nationalism. So that's why I think it's hard for us, or hard for me, I just speak for myself, to reconcile.
No,
the-
I hear
the
you.
vibe
I hear you, and
stuff with this,
that's compelling. And again, I just like, we're all gonna get different things out of this conversation, but like, I sincerely, Econoboy and Josiah, I really only know you guys for when you chime in on on Wick's channel and when I watch this show. But like, Pisco and Hutch, I watch your streams. I find value in what you have to say. I agree, that's bad. And actually, I think that connection that you just made sort of explicit, the sort of anti-interventionist overlap there, that's a good point. That is compelling to me. That's a direction that I am concerned with. Yes.
So
Okay.
I think, so just to jump in here, I think, well, where to start? Okay, so I think that something that you said that I really disagree with. Obviously, I think most people when they vote, they don't take it to be a very you could say moral decision, right? They just kind of vote, like you said, based on vibes, like whoever they kind of intuit would be better for society. Some people have very more, evangelical Christians, I'm sure, have very deep-seated conservative religious beliefs or something like that, right? But, at the end of the day, you can do immoral things without realizing it. You can do moral things without realizing it. The actions that we take are always, in some sense, guided by our senses of morality. You make the point of, well, this is kind of hiding, I think, behind the consequences of Trump's administration. Oh, well, my vote just didn't make a difference. It's like, okay, well, I don't think that's how morality works, right? Like if a bunch of people are like throwing stones at, if there's a bunch of people are stoning someone to death for some inconceivable reason, and I pick up a stone and just like throw it in the general direction, I don't think that I would say like, well, I mean, I was just one of the people who threw a stone. I didn't, it's like, come on, guys. Like, did I really do anything that bad? Like, no, like it's fucked up. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the way that I would view that. And I think although voting in a ballot box isn't quite as direct as throwing a stone at someone, to Hutch's point, millions of people are going to, have limited access or lose their access to health insurance. Millions of people are going to die. I mean, like, this isn't like you said, oh, these projections, like there's vaccine shipments that go to these countries that save lives. We know vaccines work. Those shipments aren't going
that are
anymore,
on a tight schedule.
right?
Like some of these, like these medicinal regimens, like they require like specific times and dates, and they're just sitting there collecting dust.
Millions of dollars worth of food spoiling in a factory.
The last thing I was just going to say, one more thing, was I really also disagree with this general method of voting. Like you said, well, I might vote for the Democrats based on how extreme some of the elements on the right are. I think you should vote based on the actually existing governments and politicians of either party, right? I mean, I agree. Like when I see some leftist protests, I'm like, that is outside of my mind right there. Like, I don't know if I'd agree with everything that every leftist protester does. And similarly, like when I say Stephen Miller's a Nazi, it's because I really do think that he is, right? But if we were to compare those two groups, right? We've got Stephen Miller, who he liked a white nationalist book where the plot of the book was an Indian immigrant raping a white woman, and he shared a bunch of websites on white nationalist websites, and he's a believer in white genocide theory, and he thinks that denationalization for people with immigrant backgrounds makes sense, even people who came here legally, whether you call that a Nazi or not.
His uncle called him a Nazi, for the record.
Yeah. Well, Jews can't be Nazis apparently, right? Even though they fucking line by line, besides the anti-Semitism,
Nazism's central
belief, right?
like dogma is anti-Semitism, so it's ridiculous. But go ahead.
I don't think the central dogma to Nazism is like
it absolutely
just anti-Semitism.
is. Anti-Semitism is the organizing principle of Nazism.
Pisco.
Just call them evil.
The Nazis didn't kill only Jews. They had
I didn't say that. I said the organizing principle of Nazism is anti-Semitism.
Whatever.
It is central to their ideology.
This is why I hate using the word Nazi, even if it applies, is because we start debating what Nazi
I'm with
what's
the
actually happening.
I wouldn't have jumped in if you just don't talk shit. Don't do your little snipes.
Yeah. My little snipes. What are you talking about? You're the one that brought it up, Pisco. Okay, I made my point. You jumped in. Now, the point that I was trying to make was that I don't find a serious difference in. Oh, I do find. I'm sorry, a serious difference in a guy like Trump, who puts a guy like Stephen Miller in one of the highest positions in our government, and like the actually existing administration of Democrats, where like, yeah, I guess some of them believe in equity a little too hard, and some of them have pro-Palestinian, it just seems like the way we should vote is the governments.
I think that's fair, and that's good, and I like agree with you. That's like very logical. That's very sound. That's not how everyone votes, for better or for worse. I can I can take on board what you're saying. You said a lot of things, and I had like responses that came up in my mind.
Of course, yeah.
Now I'm having trouble tracking all of them, but
I talked about there were two main points. One was the morality of your vote and the throwing a stone at someone. The other one was I think that the way we should vote is like the actually governing coalition of these parties, not necessarily in reaction to the fringes of either movement.
Sure. So with regard to the morality of the vote, like I understand what you're saying, and I hear you, and like if there are, maybe it's a stronger point. Maybe you could call it negligence. Maybe it's a stronger case if you're talking about someone who's cheering on some of the things that are happening right now. The way that I sort of see it is like I voted in an election that I knew there was a very slim chance that my vote would matter. And when I was far on the left, I was for like abolishing the electoral college. Okay, so this is a frustration that I've had for a long time as someone who has always lived in very blue states, right? I mean, I
Would you have
voted
voted
blue all
Trump?
the time.
Would you have voted Trump if you lived in Pennsylvania?
It would have been a no. I don't think so. Would have been a much harder call for me. I wouldn't have voted Kamala again. I was decided at that point that I wasn't voting for the left, but that would have been a very different calculation that I would have had to do. I think
Why?
what I
Because like your
Because
vote
it would
is just as
matter.
no.
yeah, because
your
it would
vote is-
matter more.
Your vote is a lot, just as unlikely. It's 0.01% to be the deciding vote in a Pennsylvania general election than it
Okay, in
is
Florida
any
in
other place.
2000, the vote was decided by less than 500 people. So after
I would-
that, right, in Pennsylvania it was 20,000 votes. Like the level of possibility is orders of magnitude greater if you live in a swing state than if you live in a
It is not meaningfully
California
different.
or a
It-
blue state, right? It just is.
No, it is not meaningfully different at all. The likelihood that a single vote is
insane?
going to be. I'm not insane. So
You're just wrong then.
I'm not wrong. The
You are.
likelihood
Damn,
that you're.
Pisco taking L's.
I am not wrong.
Do you think that a
Oh
voter
my
in
God.
California has as much chance to influence the election as a voter in Pennsylvania?
Effectively, yes.
Okay,
It's
I
both. It's
don't
both.
believe it.
99.99. If you want to look at the actual why are you fucking shaking your head? There's plenty of actual articles and
This has
and
been
research on
this has been a clarion call on the left for a long time, right? The frustration that the left is overwhelmingly able to have these popular vote victories and then lose in the electoral college, and there has been a strong disenfranchisement of voters on the left for a long time. I hear what you're saying, like you're making a point about a statistical analysis that any one individual person has the same likelihood of like
But
being.
you agree with that,
deciding
don't
vote.
you? You do agree with that?
Sure. Yes. Yes.
Right. So
I guess,
okay. My question is, given the high levels of the fact that you would affect the outcome is going to be completely astronomical
Sure.
chance in both cases. Why would it change? Why would you be more like unsure about the Pennsylvania one? Personally, it shouldn't matter, right? You're going to punish the Democratic Party in one versus the other, and it's very unlikely to affect the outcome in both cases, Pennsylvania or New York.
Sure. Again, to me, it feels like it would be a different calculation for me. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to give you a better answer. Wick seems to understand what I'm saying. I think there's a reason that we
translator.
So does Pisco. I mean, why do you like Pisco? Why do you think Kamala spent so much time in the 7 swing states? Obviously, those votes are going to matter more.
So it matters more in bulk for a person who's running the race. The point is, when you're talking about the personal motivation for someone to vote, right? Someone's individual vote is an individual's vote is incredibly unlikely to affect in a dispositive way the outcome in any election, right? Especially in these presidential elections, when has it ever happened? But also it's very, very, very low likelihood odds. So why would that change the calculus if you are physically in Pennsylvania, where you have a very astronomically low chances of having a dispositive vote in the outcome, and the same thing in New York, where effectively it's both like zero? Because it feels different. And she answered the question, and I hear her, it feels different. Why does it feel different? Because and if it has to do with your prior on what you're more likely to affect the outcome on, doesn't that affect your analysis? Like, maybe Trump isn't the better person to win. Like, if part of your analysis that's changing you from definitely vote Trump in one case versus maybe I'm unsure in the other has to do with like the tendency to affect the outcome, or at least the feeling that you might affect the outcome, doesn't that implicitly imply like you have an aversion to this outcome and at least some of your hesitancy in the one case is influenced by
I have an aversion to Trump. I always have had an aversion to Trump, and I know that's what complicates
you wouldn't vote
this.
for Kamala. You clarified that you wouldn't vote for Kamala, so we're kind of in the same
I did,
territory
yeah.
regardless.
So to be clear, so I guess like you would take the votes out of it to be like crystal clear on this, regardless of what state you literally or hypothetically resided in or voted in at the time, you preferred Trump winning the election to Kamala Harris. That's fair to say. Okay.
Surely you must have
Yeah, I
thought of
mean,
this.
I was right. I hear you. Right, that should be like the most obvious question there. Yeah, and like, did I think that would be? like I said before, and it's not a good answer, and that's fine, and I grant that, but like I was kind of feeling like not much changes, you know, and I didn't expect all of the things to happen that have been happening. Like when my mom was very worried after the election, and I was saying, you know, like we got to wait to see for the courts to decide these things, right? And then we have the administration going against the courts, and so these are things that do concern me that I'm not happy with. Again, like
well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you acknowledging that. Here's my question, because you mentioned this
I
earlier.
feel like that's all I can do. And we can try to bring me back and be like, do I, you know? It's like,
yeah, I got
yes, it's really not
After
about.
I want to go.
No, yeah. Well, actually, no. You go ahead, Wick. You go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, because this is fresh. This conversation for me is frustrating. I would not be shocked if it was more frustrating for me than for poor Tally here. I understand, right? The questions that Hutch and others are asking, like the did you regret the vote? And I think it's fair to ask, right? But this idea that we can guilt people into never voting for the other side again, I don't think it's effective, and I fear that it might be counter-effective when you try to cast this kind of like this 14.
No one's doing that, Wick. This is
14
insane.
million
No one is doing that.
You are absolutely all doing it.
We have to lay
if
out
you allow me to explain, I will demonstrate it. Like, oh, you voted for Biden. All the blood of the Gazans are on your hands. You were the one who
said that
specifically
here.
did that. Hutch with his question and the rest
No,
of you
Hutch,
with your
no,
questions
Hutch
about
was
this.
no.
You
I'm
won't
not
let me
saying
finish
Hutch-
because you know
that's-
I'm right.
no,
You're trying to talk over me
no.
because you
That was not what happened. This is
what we're trying to
bullshit.
say. What you're trying to do right now is cast the blame for the
No, that's not
deaths
what Hutch
and
was
all
trying
the
to do.
bad
No,
things that happened
that is not at all what Hutch was trying to say.
No.
So Hutch was listening. So Hutch was listening to Tali, and Tali said, "One thing I'm very concerned about is the kind of nationalism that is embodied by these extremists." Hutch listened to what she said and said, "Well, here's a way that this manifests, that the nationalism of the extremists, which you attribute to the extremists, is actually, you know, there's maybe more of it in the administration, and it's manifesting in a policy." And in that statement, more contrary to it being like a bad statement or trying to put the blame on Tali, she said that was the most compelling thing that she's heard so far. And she said, I have to think about it. So it's complete bullshit for you to now say, well, something that Tali took to heart out of Hutch listening to Tali is somehow an indication is somehow an indication that Hutch is like
smart.
trying to berate her.
You're so smart.
Hold on, let me.
Hold on. No. Pico, you're so smart. You're so kind. Do you think I actually mean what I'm saying here? Even though those words are what I'm using, you think I'm actually meaning it? How can you tell that I don't mean what I'm saying here?
So, yeah, you're full of shit because you're an idiot. You're an idiot. You're accusing. Oh my god.
And when someone's being insincere.
You're accusing Hutch. I'm not talking about Hutch. You're accusing Hutch of trying to guilt someone. That's not what he was doing. That's not what he was doing.
I am simply saying this conversation is
Let me
frustrating
share how I feel.
because instead of talking about like, okay, what can we do, right? Like, how can we figure out what people like Tali and things like that, what their actual problems
You accuse
are,
Hutch of guilting people. That's not what he did.
That's
bullshit. That's bullshit.
For the Democratic Party, we're going to sit here and have a struggle session, right? Like,
wait.
You regret your vote. You're a terrible person, Tali.
That's not what he's doing.
We're just establishing a baseline. That's all.
Okay, wait,
let
me jump in.
Let the terrible person talk. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm fucking with you, Tally. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're both right, Wick and Pisco. Okay, so I do.
Oh, pick a side, you centrist. Come on.
Frankly, I know, right? Frankly, I felt moralized more by Econoboy, and I'll touch on that because that is something that I wanted to address. He said a lot of things that, again, had me think about a lot of things. The 14 million number is not what got me. Connecting it to this isolationism and this idea that this idea that like every dollar that we spend abroad would otherwise be if we just didn't fund this one program in this one country, or if we didn't support our allies who are, you know, at wars of survival, then we would all have universal health care and there'd be no homeless people and everyone would have a mansion and all of this stuff. I resent that a lot. That's creeping up a lot on the left. That sort of
100%, no, 100%. But that's not what Hutch did.
No, I agree. Hold on. I agree with you. So it was more compelling when we got to that second point,
right?
When we drew that direct connection. That's more compelling than the numbers, to be honest. And they're like, isn't that horrible? Because like, yes, that is obviously horrible. And it's not something that I wish to defend, you know, because that is bad. I don't want to and again, I don't think I am responsible for the deaths of those people. Frankly, I'm just gonna be honest
I
about the
was
way
not
that I see
suggesting
it.
Me
that for the
neither.
record.
Yeah, sure, right. But with what you were saying, Econoboy, like the just the morality of the vote and stuff, and this is your perspective, and that's fine and that's fair. But like, would you? And I think maybe you would have the same perspective of like someone on the left who was just withholding their vote from Kamala and get voting green or voting
I
something
would
else.
1,000% for the
Yeah,
record.
Right.
Fuck those people. They're just as bad as MAGA. I'm
That's
with you
true.
on that one.
But are
They're
they?
just
Because
as bad as
seems like-
MAGA.
it
Well,
kind of seems like the
I-
way that Econoboy set it up that it wasn't. Like there are like other sort of
No.
principled ways to do it. But if your vote goes for Trump,
Yeah, obviously.
and I mean,
it's-
fair enough. Trump is different from Jill Stein, but
Well, that's my point, right? Is that obviously, we can agree and disagree with like the rationale behind, why somebody votes for somebody or whatnot. I mean, I think that to be fair, look, I will say that people who didn't go out and vote for Kamala, whether it was, because they wanted to vote for Trump, because of like there was a protest vote for Trump, or because they had these like far left kind of not far left necessarily, but like these very like pro-Palestinian like views, and they were very, very anti the Biden administration just generally. Yeah, I would say of course there's moral culpability there. I mean, for goodness sake, like I think there's such moral culpability. I'll give an example. I was listening, I don't even know why my wife was listening to this. We were in a car ride and she was listening to a radio show from Dearborn, and they just happened to be doing a segment on following up with people who didn't vote for Kamala, right? So people who voted for Trump, people who voted for the Green Party, people who just didn't vote. And obviously Dearborn's a super Muslim, most Muslim city in the country. At least it's the biggest, most Muslim city. And one thing that I thought was interesting was that the people who voted not for Kamala, right? The people who just didn't vote at all, they were willing to give interviews and they were willing to say, look, this is why I didn't vote. And most of them seemed decently regretful about it, that, look, honestly, I didn't think that Trump would be so bad, especially even on the issue of Israel-Palestine to the extent that they care about it. But the ones who voted for Trump were not even willing to give an interview, right? They were not even willing to show themselves in public,
I am.
right? Yeah. Well, but I'm saying like they voted for Trump for radically different reasons than I think that you did, and that's fine, obviously. But yeah, I would say that there's always a moral angle to how you vote and how you should feel about voting, right? That I do think that and it should be as conscious as possible. Most people don't, but I think that if you're gonna deconstruct why you vote, you should certainly have deeply held moral reasons as to why you vote, right? Oh, I think poverty is a big deal. Well, why is that? And then think about which side is actually better or worse on those issues. Of course, there's a moral axis to this. And I mean, yeah, like I do think that to the extent that Trump is terrible and to the extent that you thought that voting for Trump was like a good thing to do as a means to protest the Democrats, I really don't think that was the right decision, right? Both morally and practically, that I don't think to the extent
that doesn't surprise me.
Well, but I don't think that the Democrats, I guess we haven't really gotten into you talked about it, but I didn't really understand the answer of like what lesson the Democrats should learn from this. Like, I just don't really know that this is a long-term beneficial thing to do, to like protest vote for Trump. And I think the evidence is mounting that that's the case, right? It was terrible to
Yeah.
Yeah,
do.
and Tally, if
That's-
you can respond to that, then I've got something to say to hopefully like circle this particular square. Go ahead.
Sure, that's fair, and I agree. It's obviously not like a long-term strategy. And again, like I keep trying to, unfortunately, burst Wick's balloon, which is like, well, I guess the lessons that I want the left to take away from somebody like me is like there are people who want the same sort of like social end goals that you do, who are really resentful of the grievance framing of everything, that the constant degradation of white people. And I say this as someone who like I don't see myself like I recognize that I'm white, but like I don't even put myself in that group necessarily. And I used to make lots of white jokes and stuff like that. Like I think this is toxic to our culture. I think it's like bad for the mental health of individuals who are really eating this stuff up. And I think it's bad for our society at large. And I know that's like a big, like grand dramatic statement.
But how do you Tally, here's an example. How do you weigh that against the degradation of so many different groups from people on the right. This is one of the issues that I seem to have foundationally with people who say that this is at least one of the predominant reasons why they are, rejecting the Democrats and not voting for the Democrats is it's like, okay, I like this colorblind approach, right? And I don't necessarily agree with that approach, but I don't think it's the most offensive thing on the planet. But again, when we compare Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, I'm sundowning, obviously. But
You
when
can't
we
be the
compare
nominee
those
next
two-
year.
right? When we compare those two, one of these people had a message of joy and being uplifting, and Donald Trump was on stage saying
Very
that
contrived joy,
yeah.
I would
Well,
say.
whatever, Tally. The point is that Trump had a message. He literally said that Haitian immigrants were eating dogs and cats in Springfield, Ohio. And if I had to compare those
We don't
two
know
people,
that they weren't.
and if we, yeah, true. If I had to compare those two people and
I don't
say who is more likely to break the principle of a colorblind approach, it's the guy who's saying Haitian immigrants are eating dogs and cats, and it's the guy who appoints a guy named Stephen Miller who thinks that immigrants raping white women is a problem, and that's why we should. I mean, it's just like
And to give an even more specific example to piggyback off Akana Boy's point right there. So multiple times throughout their campaign, Trump repeatedly made identitarian insults towards Kamala Harris about her gender and her race. She never took the bait. At no point did she say, at no point did she say, how dare you talk to a woman like that? How dare you talk to a black woman like that? She would have been well within her rights to fire back, and she never did. Her iconic line was, something like, "That's insane. Next question." That was what she said. Next question.
Yeah.
So to Akana Boy's point, can you address that? Because Trump trafficked in more blatant identitarian rhetoric by far than Kamala Harris during the campaign.
I agree. Kamala Harris did not run an identitarian campaign. I think she explicitly toned that down. I mean, her 2024 campaign looked nothing like her previous campaigns, plural. She ran for president twice before, is that right?
Once before.
Once.
2020.
Okay. Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. It's like I guess it's easier for me to conceptualize. I guess there's a few things at play, and this is something that again people don't like, but I see it as like true for me at least.
Trigger them.
The left comes across to people who are like skeptical or like me or a little bit jaded or have turned anti-woke. The left comes across as very inauthentic, and so you're right. Again, I don't want people on the right talking in these identitarian terms. And by the way, that's a big thing that Wick and I talk about in this like so-called woke right? It's like it's literally the exact inverse. It's like straight white men are being targeted and are being oppressed, and we need to implement these different government policies to free the straight white man. And so I resent that stuff. I guess I saw it more as like that's Trump's personality. Like he's just like always throwing insults and jabs and stuff like that. And yeah, like I said, I was desensitized, and I'm, the more we sit here and like go through all these things, like I don't think it's good that I was desensitized. I think that's an issue, and that's part of the reason that I have frustration with the left.
You raised a point there that I thought was very interesting. You said authenticity, and I actually agree with you that Democrats do feel inauthentic to a lot of people, and that's something that I think a common theme on Live and Learn is like making fun of people like Chuck Schumer and other people when they are inauthentic.
Oh God,
or like
kill me. Murder me.
The people are aroused.
I really appreciate you saying that.
No.
Because right now, what's undeniable, and why I think this conversation, even though people can judge it in the meta level, is helpful is because there's like 70% within the Democratic Party, put aside disaffected liberals who left the party. Within the party, there's this disaffectation with the leadership, and it does center around this notion of authenticity, but also in terms of fight and ganas. And you would mention there that like you feel bad or you feel something that like you were desensitized to some of the bad or I don't know, the negative traits of Trump. Are you saying that from like a policy perspective or from the accusations? And do you feel bad because you think that some of the accusations are true?
The accusations about Trump?
Yeah, that
Me?
he has this kind of authoritarian tendency towards him, that some of the stuff is bad. Like, why would you feel bad about being desensitized to those traits if you didn't feel that at bottom, some of these criticisms are actually true?
I do think they're true. Yeah. Like I said, like all of the criticisms. I really like Richard Hanania because he kind of occupies this space that I think is really awesome, which is like he came out and like did the I regret my vote. I should have voted for Kamala, and like could have taken the ticket that everyone on both sides does when they like switch over, right? But he's just like too autistic to lie. And like he actually doesn't like the woke stuff, and he actually is like fiscally conservative, in an authentic like
Another reason to hate Trump.
He hates
thought out way.
and he hates the terrorists. But there's also
Exactly,
something that
exactly.
he disagrees with you on, right? He disagrees with you that the presidency doesn't matter, right? The reason why he said let's vote for Trump is because he thought Trump would be different, and that seems to be a little bit counter to your notion that it doesn't really matter. Who cares, right?
Yeah, I basically thought that, again, I was like caught up in this new coalition of people. And I thought there were going to be a lot of different voices around him that would moderate. I agree with you about his instincts. Like he's authoritarian, but I would even put that behind just his narcissism. Like he's authoritarian because he has a big ego and power, right? So it's like he revels in taking the power. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Again, like,
what's stopping you from joining Richard? Like, what about Richard's whole article and now recent commentary hasn't convinced you?
Econoboy.
Nothing really. Like, I just even just the term regret. And again, I don't want to get into too much of a side note with this, but like, is a concept that I've thought about separately, like within the realm of psychology, and just like what if it's even really a useful measure. People do what I'm doing now, right? Which is like there's like a sunk cost fallacy, right? And we try to at least rationalize it, like, well, I don't regret what I did, but I learned from it, right? People will say that they don't regret things that were like really horrible and traumatic in their lives, right?
I think Pisco's point is as much as, I mean, personally, as much as we'd love to see every Trump supporter express regret and then change their votes, regret's not even like a necessary predicate. I think what he's asking is, given that this is not what you expected, this seems to be much worse than you expected. I mean, even fuck the regret part, just as a practical matter, why not join Richard as a public crusader against the Trump administration and the MAGA Republican movement? Yeah.
We got the midterms coming up in a year and a half.
Midterms coming up.
Perfect time to express your dissatisfaction with the administration.
Kill the past.
You could even say, when somebody asks, okay, well, Tally, do you regret your vote? You could even get into like, listen, I don't know. Regret. Yeah, I don't do regret. What I do know is this is not what I expected.
It's not that I don't do regret, right? It's almost like I don't trust myself to like have a non-biased analysis, right? Like of this type of thing. I think I at least have these different, self-protection mechanisms that jump into play. But listen, you make an interesting point. So a few things. Back to the point that I made earlier about me not proselytizing this is like, for example, the origin of the trial of Tali was because I like mentioned that I voted Trump, and that surprised people. So I don't walk around talking about how great the Trump administration is. I don't walk around saying how wonderful the things that his administration is doing. I comment, like, I tweet sometimes, and when we're having discussions that are topical, which oftentimes they are on WhickTV, I share my input. And I feel like what I have now is instincts that have become a bit more conservative. And I even think about my conservatism as like I want to conserve liberalism in more of the classical way, although I'm not exactly a libertarian. But
I get that, and I agree, because you're saying you're not proselytizing, you're not here for a campaign purpose. You struggled with, and you didn't like broadcast your vote, and you struggled with it internally. But so putting aside the proselytizing part, why not take Richard's tack and in the future potentially vote for? Don't vote. I'm not saying vote for a Democrat. In the future, like, are you going to be voting for Democrats or not, or voting for Republicans, or is it going to be more issue by issue? Or do you know what I'm saying? Like, if the choice comes before you again, are you going to?
It's probably going to be candidate. Yeah, I don't know, right? So again, I'm now when it was leading up to the election, I was very much like, the left is headed in totally the wrong direction, and I'm willing to even just take the gamble of what this is. Right now, I'm like, oh, the right is headed in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And again, I make more of a focus on like the cultural right. Not that I take issue with a lot of the things that the administration is doing, but again, just like I was seeping up the culture of the left, right, the social cultural influences of the left,
It's
I'm
the
really concerned about
podcasters
those on
instead
the
of the
right
politicians,
now.
right? Is that correct, Tali? That it would be the people who are in the party, the influencers within the party, not so much
Yeah,
the
and I
politicians
mean,
within each party, right? So not so much
right, and
Chuck
first of
Schumer
all,
or Biden or
no,
any of those
correct.
people, but it's the people who, like, for
Yes,
example,
and
live
these
and learn,
these
right? For example, people who are the Kyle Kalinskis, right? The all the other like culture around it, and same on the right. So you have the people who are like, I don't know, like
Charlie
you mentioned,
Kirk?
like the Tucker Carlsons and things like that. It's the culture, and this is the frustrating part, because you guys are like, well, the policies of the Democrats are better, and sure, yes, absolutely, but a lot of people vote on culture. A lot of people vote on culture, and when they talk about culture, they don't care so much what the politicians say or do. They care how they are treated. They care how they are treated when they go into spaces that are left-leaning or right-leaning. And when they go into space like left-leaning, and then you see miles and miles of chat saying she's a racist, she's a bigot, all she cares about is Israel, kick her off, gang. Do you not think that this has an effect that is far greater than any policy position on influencing people and what they do?
I think we're
does.
treating her with respect. I think we're treating her with respect, and we're treating her like a human
are.
being. We're not coddling her.
Did you not
and
hear
we're-
anything I just said?
Yeah, I understand. And the chat stuff, I don't think that Tolly would ask for
Some animosity here, boys.
Like I don't think she would be like, okay, you censor your chat so they don't criticize me and the Israel stuff. We're sussing out, and at times, we both, Wick and I have admonished our chats. Me privately, Hutch and I have admonished our chats to like be respectful and be kindful, whatever. And when Doobie had that little super chat and said, "Hey, $10, all you care about Israel," I spoke up and I said she literally said the opposite, that it wasn't influenced by Israel. And so I think that we're being confrontational in a sense, but I'm trying to treat her as a peer and not
You
as
are.
some like.
I'm not talking
Yeah.
about you
Yeah.
specifically right now.
Okay.
I'm talking about culture in your community.
It's like to Wick and Tolly, like this is something I go round and round on. I identify with some of the shit that you're talking about. Like I was way more we'll say progressive. Like I still call myself a progressive. I was way more progressive. I was like fully in the tank in like 2019 and 2020. There was more of like a unifying purpose back then. So like I got along more with people to my left because Trump was this great unifying presence. He gave this kind of clarity. Like there wasn't a lot of discussion about intra-party civil war because he was the threat. I mean, and add on top of that, the George Floyd stuff that he just made 10 times worse, the COVID response, and it was just a really intense time, but there was more to get along with. And once Biden was elected, I started really scrapping with a lot of people who, I mean, just like to your point, there are fully psychotic people on the left. They are toxic to the left-wing politics. They are not concerned with institutional power. All they care about is moralizing and telling you you're a bad person. And they think that this makes
they don't want power. They want to endlessly critique power.
And these people exist in large numbers in online spaces, and I would assume in activist spaces. So I guess what I would encourage you to do is like what I did is like I say, fuck these people. I fight with these people constantly. But at the end of the day, I'm not thinking about them when I go to vote. Like they have no part to play in my thinking whatsoever. I'm thinking about like, what are the consequences of this election? What can I expect is going to happen if this candidate wins or this candidate wins? You can still fight with these insane lefties. Like, believe me, I do it daily.
Hutch, you're correct. You're correct. That's exactly what we should do and what people should do. But what I'm trying to point out is that that's not what people do. That's not how people vote.
No, fuck them.
I
I'm
agree.
just saying, like, don't let that. They should not factor into. I should or should not or whatever. Ideally, they would not factor into your decision making.
I hear you, and I agree with you, and even like WhickTV. I mean, it's not hatred from people online that motivates me. It's really not. And so this is where, like, I was talking. Wick gave me a therapy session earlier today. I was really stressed about this, guys, and I was. Again, I have a parasocial relationship with Hutch, right? Because I watch your stream, and I knew that you would relate to like some of these things. And I guess like what I keep trying to emphasize, and I know I'm not doing a good job of it, and also it's not satisfying what I have to say, but it's not just that I am turned off by people on the left, which I am very turned off. I think about things differently, and that is not just vibes. Like Econoboy, when you were saying like, oh yeah, and like, you know, the right is doing, you know, the right is doing these awful things, and the left, like, yeah, some of them care too much about equity, but it's not just some of them care too much about equity. And yes, I hate the virtue signaling that goes on the left, and they do it on the right too. And Richard Hanania has talked about it, he's calling it vice signaling, and that's exactly what's going on, right? It's like who can say the most crass thing, and there is this social pressure to like not respond in any type of way of offense. You don't want to be the cuck in the situation, you don't want to be the shit lib. And so there's a similar thing going on in the opposite direction that is very disturbing on the right. But so while I resent all of that going on the left, it's not just, yes, people who advocate about, whitey is so bad and we live under the patriarchy and all that. I do believe that a lot of this more extreme sort of postmodern left-wing academic jargon and theory did make its way into the greater liberal left. And it's not a condemnation. Like, again, I think there's like good intentions for some of these things. And I think I just think about some of these things differently. So it's not just that people are saying these things. I do feel like the way that what you believe about the world influences like how you try to attack things, right? So if you believe that there is like pervasive systemic racism, you are going to be continually trying to fix and point at all of these different things until you get the outcomes that you believe should happen. I don't believe that humans are blank slates. I don't believe that we're ever going to achieve that type of demographic representation. And I don't think it's something we should strive for. I don't think it's where our policies should be put. And that is a focus on the left. We saw like the things that people point to, and those are the extreme ones, but like during COVID of like prioritizing different loans or prioritizing access to the vaccine, like, I don't think these things are good. And I mean, with the vaccine, I guess that's sort of a different conversation because there were various groups that were deemed to be high risk, and there are like reasons, right? Why, anyway. But yeah, I think like if you believe that the reason that there is inequality in society is because of sexism and racism, you're going to implement policy as such. And I don't believe that those are the reasons for these differences in society. And so
these people that you're talking about though, I mean, do you not feel somewhat comforted? I mean, a lot of people in chat would be upset about this, but like, do you not feel somewhat comforted that the party does seem to be moderating, that it does seem to be kind of moving away from the sort of like what you might call like peak woke era of like the 2020 stuff? We saw Kamala herself, like you mentioned, like she ran a totally different campaign in 2024. She was not running on the sort of rhetoric that she was running on back then.
But you didn't buy it, right? It was that was your tally.
It was inauthentic, and I think so. So I don't know if her walking back on the identitarian stuff was inauthentic. I found her to be inauthentic. Again, like when Econoboy was talking about, there was this one campaign of joy. Like, well, yeah, I know they kept using the word joy a lot, and joy was in their branding, but it didn't feel very joyous to me personally. So that felt contrived and inauthentic. But I don't really know what she thinks, right? Like, it's hard for me because I'm going to go on a little tangent here. I don't know what Kamala Harris specifically thinks about identitarianism. If she never really believed it, let's say she was virtue signaling in 2020 when she was talking about all of these more woke or whatever extreme things. If she never believed it, then I would have appreciated some acknowledgement of that, like, or if she changed her mind, right? Like that's sort of like the sanity check that I need, is like an acknowledgement that these things are actually wrong and not helpful, and not just I'm going to say it if I think it helps me to be elected, and I'm not going to say it if it doesn't. And let me just take that one step further. So when I say I don't know what these people think, when I was first coming out from the left and whatever and talking about this stuff, there was a lot of people on the right, especially, or disaffected people from the left, who believe that essentially this is all, they're very conspiratorial in how they frame it. Like, oh, none of these people believe
you don't
it,
say.
right? Like, yeah, right. And so there's plenty of conspiratorially minded people on the left too. Again,
Yes.
I have real issue with them. But so there are people who believe that, like, oh, no one on the left actually believes this. They're doing it cynically to gain power because they know that having these victimhood gives you social cachet. I believe that's something that's like true, and we need to acknowledge like this idea that like, Black people and women and gay people and trans people like have a harder time getting jobs and getting accepted into these places where actually oftentimes there is an incentive to hire people from these marginalized groups. I feel like we're just like not living in reality, and I would appreciate a reality check.
I take your point about authenticity, but like I want to propose something different for you. Like we should fully expect that. Like it sounds like you're looking for a politician that you want to get a beer with, and you like fully respect them, and you want to connect with them on a more like human level. But politicians will shift with the political winds all the time. That's just a function of democracy. Like I personally don't care that Barack Obama ran on anti-gay marriage in 2008, and by the time the Supreme Court decision came around, it redefined the party, and now we have a totally different party now. This is just a function of democracy. Like I like
Trump himself does it. JD Vance. I mean, these are just to really put a point on that. That's not exclusive to the left of the Democratic Party. I would argue in many ways the Republican Party is much more inauthentic. Trump changes positions all the time.
It's a politician thing. Yeah, it's a politician thing. Well, and it goes to the conversation that was started here criticizing all the right-wing rumbling about the big beautiful bill and then everyone just like falling in line. So I agree with you. This is a politician problem. And again, I'm not a Republican. Like I didn't get pushed out of my activist circles and go run to the right. Like I hope you can appreciate that much. Not that you need to give me fucking cookies, but like there are a lot of roads that people
they're baking
take.
right now. They'll be done in about 5 minutes.
This wasn't an overnight thing. This wasn't an overnight thing. This wasn't an easy thing for me either.
No,
I
understand. The reason I'm just bringing up the Republic because you did vote for the Republican in this election. See, I took what you said to heart earlier, which is that at the end of the day, you made a protest vote a negative decision. Which one was worse in your mind? And I take that at face value. I'm not even trying to build an affirmative case for the Democratic Party for you because clearly the last time you voted, it was about who was worse. And that's how a lot of people, and Wick even acknowledged it, that's how a lot of people vote. What I'm trying to explain.
Can I just stop right there? Sorry, guys. I will let you finish. I'm gonna let you finish. But I don't understand like worse without relation to better. Like worse is a relational term and better is a relational term. And I don't actually understand the notion of something being worse without something else being better. Like it just seems like those words are relational, and so I don't actually understand that.
Right.
Concept.
Well, yes, that's just like obvious though, right? And people talk about voting for the lesser of two evils, right? And you could argue that the Donald Trump administration is much more evil than the Kamala Harris.
So I think it's kind of weaselly. I'm not saying you're weaselly, but I hear people like Ryan Mullally. Shout out Ryan Mullally. But I hear people say this term like they deserve to lose, or they're the party that like, and they cast it in this kind of negative language as though deserve to lose or any of this kind of like it's a negative decision having to do with who was worse. Like worse and better are relational, and so saying that someone deserves to lose just feels like, well, someone else deserves to win. It's relational to something else, right?
And that's to touch on again Pisco's point there. That's why I wasn't accusing you of being a Republican. I was just saying when you were talking about inauthenticity, I understand your point. Kamala Harris did a 180 on a number of different issues. She was pegged as inauthentic throughout the campaign. What I'm trying to point out is, as you consider contemplating, voting in the midterms, then the next presidential election, is that the Trump Republican Party is inauthentic itself, just objectively so. We could give you a list of policies where Kamala Harris flipped and Trump has flipped on more policies. Trump flipped on H-1B visas recently with Elon Musk. He used to oppose H-1B visas, and then his biggest donor was like, fuck you, if you go after H-1B visas, we got a problem. Trump's like, oh, I love H-1B visas. He's done it time and time and time again.
Yeah, based. I was on the Elon side of that feud on the right.
Right.
Yeah.
Of the two options, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, because I'm pro-immigration. Again, that's the thing too, is like, yeah, I don't know.
You voted for Trump. You're pro-immigration. You didn't care.
I'm pro-legal. I'm pro-legal immigration,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
That's the obvious, easy thing to say right there. And I am pro-legal immigration, and I have lots of immigrants in my family. And as many people probably know, immigrants tend to also resent people who they view as like skipping the line or making things more difficult.
That's fair. If you're pro-legal
true.
Immigration, are you aware that Joe Biden naturalized like 2 times as many immigrants than Trump did during his first term, and that Stephen Miller doesn't want to just limit illegal immigration. He wants to like explicitly limit legal immigration as well.
Yes.
Like I'm not
and
sure.
there are, and again, it's like, this is back to, so I agree with you. And this is where like, I wish no one's going to like this. No one's going to like this. Did you guys watch The Destiny and Ben Shapiro?
Yes.
I never watched it.
Yeah, on Lex Friedman. On Lex Friedman.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I I like Destiny and I like Ben Shapiro. And I kind of joke like those are two people that I watch. Now,
How?
I relate to Destiny more. Like whatever. Some of the stuff that Ben says, like I'm just like not.
But
Those aren't
everything
my.
Destiny stands for is
I know.
counter to Trump. I mean, and
I know.
But so
Which
then,
is
how,
also-
in what
I'm
sense
trying-
do you
I'm
relate to
trying
Destiny
show
more?
I'm trying to show you the nuance. Well, things I like about Destiny.
Yeah, in
He's
what sense do you relate to
authentic.
him?
He's
Okay.
authentic. He's no bullshit. He is. I feel like he's a classical liberal. So okay, sorry, that was the point that I was trying to make. Is right in the introduction of that conversation. I didn't watch it recently, but so I'm not primed exactly on what they said, but it stuck out to me so much. I was the first question like to describe their political worldview or something, and it was almost identical. And so when we're talking about the people who want to limit legal immigration, there's a real strain of that on the left, on the populist left. This is something that goes across demographics, right? There's a large segment of the Black community that is against legal and illegal immigration.
Yeah, somewhat, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Bernie, there you go, exactly. And so it's like my ideal political coalition. And I know, like, I'm not trying to add third parties and stuff. I don't think that would go over easy or well or whatever. But like, if everyone were to realign, that it were the Destinies and the Ben Shapiros and the people,
But they're counter.
Can we
Ben
use him as
Shapiro-
an example?
institutionalists
Can
and the elitists versus the populists and the anti-institutionalists.
use
Those
Destiny-
are the two frames that I'm sort of looking at the political sphere through right now. Which again,
You're right,
and
I hated that.
I see those
I
on
hated
both
that.
sides.
Can we
I know.
use Destiny then as an example? Then what's stopping you from going the Destiny route with respect to your politics? Because, to your point, for the longest
I share
time,
a lot of politics with Destiny.
what I mean is in terms, but also like his advocacy and how he voted. Like if you really identify with Destiny, let's use him as a model for your politics in the sense, what is preventing you from voting for Democrats as he's done consistently, as campaigning and advocating for Democrats over Republicans? Because he also has culture war issues with the left, but he eventually came to the conclusion, and not to to Wick's point, I know people, traffic and culture war issues, but Destiny came to the point, it just doesn't matter when it comes time to vote. That culture issues, as frustrating as they are, and he still has them, when you're voting, the politicians are just objectively 10 million times more important, and the policies are 10 million times more important. So what is keeping you, if you identify with him and your politics identify with him, from taking that step, going like, oh, I can make my culture war case here, but when it comes time to vote, just vote for the better of the two parties. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm asking?
It does. It does
Okay.
make sense. So I should be taking notes here because I keep losing my. It's been a long day for me, folks. It
No, I
did an
get it.
overnighter and came straight through here. So like I said, I share a lot of values and whatever with values. I know Destiny's not seen as the most moral guy around, but I
You can't say he doesn't
agree
have
with
values.
he has strongly held beliefs, yeah, and so I agree with a lot of his politics, not all of them. And I guess like the difference that I see is like Destiny, he sees himself affirmatively as a Democrat, and this is where again I keep coming back to this, is like I just don't anymore. So it's not like the obvious thing, like, so, and for a while that is what I was doing, was like, I'm going to fight this out on the left. And again, to a certain extent, and I've been told like at a certain point, like when everyone on the left is basically telling you, you are not one of us. There's people who say, oh, well, you can't let other people define your politics. But I think there's some truth to that, which
Yes.
is like,
Yes, hold on. If I may.
if we don't want the same things, we're not like, go Wick.
Yeah, sorry. I
No, go
just
ahead,
have
buddy.
to- I have
Yeah.
to really put the pin in here. If you have every day people saying you're conservative, oh, you hold this position, you're conservative, you're a Trump voter, you're MAGA, you're secretly crypto fascist. Eventually, people are going to be like, fuck it, yeah, I am. Fuck it, okay, sure. You're going to call me conservative all day? I'm a conservative now. Fuck you. And I think that happens a lot. And when we see Trump's strongest soldiers in your guys' chat, right, saying, "Oh, she's conservative. She's always conservative. You can never win her back," right? And then you've had people say,
Not my chat.
"Oh, look, I understand, right? But it's all
I'm
shared.
better.
I can't tell. I can't tell."
Good.
the
When I
differences,
rewatch this, I'll be
right?
watching from Hutch's
But
stream.
I hear this all the time.
Hey.
It's a very loud contingent. It may not even be a majority, but it's a very loud contingent. They'll be like, "Oh, they're just conservative." Eventually, people are gonna just believe you. Why?
Yeah,
So
but look,
why
I
do you
think-
do
I
this?
think,
Well, let me say that. So okay, so I understand what I think is probably the frustration that you guys are feeling with what Wick just said, and I share it to an extent, which is like that shouldn't be enough to make you just like change all your worldview, right? Or just like change your affiliation. Which is why I really do want to stress this: that isn't what happened for me. This was a multi-year process of my affiliation eventually changing to independent, again, not to Republican, right? And so I didn't just become a conservative, but what that did do, what in 2021, everyone telling me that I was far right and all this stuff, because Zionism is far right, and God forbid I brought the Zionism thing back. I don't want to open that can of worms, but
Well, I was going to bring it back because you mentioned Ben Shapiro
didn't-
and Destiny, and that's another through line between them. And like, what do Destiny and Ben Shapiro share in common? They both support Israel. So I mean,
no, but so Pisco,
talk really
you should
fast,
listen.
too.
You should listen to the interview because again, they do talk really fast. The intro to the interview is them describing their political worldview, and it's almost identical. It's belief in capitalistic free markets. It's belief in individual rights.
It's like liberal
and
versus
civil-
illiberal. It's like kind of what it boils down to. It's just like,
yeah, right. It's liberalism and conservatism of conserving liberalism. And so those are the values that I believe that I hold, core. And do I think that the Trump administration is currently upholding all of those values? No. So should that be enough for me to say I got my vote?
Wait.
Like, yeah, maybe, sure.
Yeah, but Talia, I think I just want to spend a little bit. That doesn't really mean very much, right? Like that's a very meaningless, I think, type of agreement to have with someone, at least for the most part, right? Now, if I'm having an abstract discussion with somebody and they say like,
Wait, what's a
can we just
meaningless
agree?
agreement?
Yeah, I don't know.
think
What are you referencing?
I think it's extremely meaningless that Ben Shapiro and Destiny have, generally speaking, a classically liberal worldview, as you described it. The reason I say that that's meaningless is because, for instance, in many respects, if I call myself a Christian and someone else calls themselves a Christian, but I'm the kind of like hippie, like Jesus loves everyone and I go to gay pride parades kind of Christian, and you're the type of Christian who thinks we should kill all gay people, then it's like, yeah, I guess we're both Christian, but like, is that really meaningful? We have such a radically different interpretation,
Right,
and
but of course
applied
they
set of
didn't.
values,
They didn't
right?
just say like we're both Christian or we're both liberals. They spelled out their worldviews, and when people are doing that, it's in the most idealistic form, right? But and this is the thing too about like Ben Shapiro. Again, I don't agree with him on everything because he is a partisan Republican in ways that I'm not. That he believes in certain things that I'm not bought into. So another thing about like the policy thing, and it's like this is a shortcoming, and it's a really valid line of attack, but like I don't know enough about everything, right? I mean, with the way that bills are written and stuff, like most senators, most of their committees and stuff aren't even reading all of these things. But so my point being, I'm not just instantly adopting what the right says is a good policy or principle either. Like there are certain instincts of mine that have changed. Like when I was on the left, I supported all social programs with no concept of where the money comes from. And I heard Hutch talk about this and it makes people very angry. But now I do have that immediate response of how do we pay for this? That matters, right? And so these are things that make me trend in the more conservative direction. But Ben Shapiro, and like maybe I'm going to be Ben Shapiro's strongest soldier. I'm probably his only soldier in this chat over here. But Ben Shapiro, he supports Trump, right? And I think that it was sort of weaselly because he was very anti-Trump in the beginning. And even this, if you guys recall, in the beginning of the 2024 election, it wasn't a given that Trump was going to win. There were people who were pushing, right, for some of the other candidates. And so I think it's it's funny. I think it's like lame and chickeny that they then just go along with it. But that's also what we're like asking, what you guys are kind of asking for on the left is like, you can talk a big game, but you need to get behind the nominee, right? Whoever it is type of thing, right? Like Mamdani, well, it doesn't matter because he won the primary. And so we need to all get behind him. And I'm not saying that Zoran Mamdani is the same thing as Donald Trump. That's not the equivalence that I'm trying to make here. So I have those frustrations with someone like Ben Shapiro. But Ben Shapiro was calling out the tariffs, like was calling out the Doge efforts, calls these things out in his, which I'm sure you guys don't watch his show, so you might as well just take my word
I
for
watched
it.
Ben
No, we
Shapiro.
did.
No.
Yeah, he did. He did call out the
watched,
tariffs. Yeah.
We watched Ben Shapiro, but Ben Shapiro is very identitarian, you know, like, and I think this gets into a super chat
I don't
we got
view
from
it that way.
From Doobie. Well, this is a super chat from Doobie, not my words, his. He says, "Please accept my sincerest apologies for my misunderstanding earlier." So first is to Wick. Why shouldn't we shame people who voted for a traitorous rapist who was clear about his intention to gut programs people rely on? If this causes them to double down after an almost 6-month train wreck, they're just voting on vibes and not worth speaking to in depth anyway. You make more progress just discussing politics or values at all. Just be chill and play video games. Maybe buy them a couple gifts around the holidays. And this is the part that, about identity. You support a state and ideology that explicitly centers around the Jewish identity. Why is identitarianism
Yeah, see,
an issue for you?
Doobie is respectfully, Doobie is obsessed with Israel, and he's made this line of attack against me about like clutching my pearls about anti-Semitism now on 2 different occasions when I didn't say anything in that direction. So Doobie is like an example of the sort of horseshoe of the right and left coming together that I am concerned with. And by the way, we're talking about the isolationist sort of growing populist trend happening on the right and the left. People like to see Israel as separate from that, right? And because of what's going on now, and there's a lot of people who like either A, don't care about foreign aid and stuff like this, who say, well, I care because it's my tax dollars. Like suddenly Israel is the one part of the budget that they're concerned about. But B, it is part of that same, in my opinion, it's part of that same strain of isolationism and stuff like that. And so yes, that's an issue that I have, and it does affect me personally as a Jew. And this is a conversation that I'm not really inclined to go down because I don't think it's an audience that's going to be very open to it. But yes, anti-Semitism on the left and the right is a huge concern of mine, a really big concern of mine.
I think that we're getting like super far flung from kind of what my original point was, right? Which is that
I forgot that the story.
Yeah.
Swerve, quick.
And
We
that's
can't talk
fine.
about this. We gotta go somewhere else. Go ahead.
Well,
please.
Wick, what are you talking? She changed the subject, not me, Wick. We had a clear through line. I had a very clear question. Okay. Now my question and kind of the point that I brought up was that you said, okay, like I wish that we could live in a world where, I guess Ben Shapiro and Destiny were kind of like the centers of the Overton window, because they have this same kind of foundational political philosophy, right, of this, classical liberalism as you would describe it. But the challenge that I have is that was a debate between Ben and Destiny, right? That Ben Shapiro and Destiny have truthfully a radically different worldview. I suppose outside of the issue of Israel, which I'm sure that they have some disagreements on that. It's been a while since I watched the debate.
They had a lot of disagreements about that.
Yeah, and similarly, all 4 of the main hosts on this show would call ourselves liberals, but even the 4 of us have a greatly now. Of course, we find a solidarity in at least voting for the Democratic Party, but I don't find that the Venn diagram in an applied and a practical sense between like the type of liberal like Ben Shapiro and the type of liberal like Destiny, that is not close to a circle, right? That is like the tiniest sliver of actual political agreement between the two. Like, we respect the Constitution, equality under the law.
That's foundational for me.
Well, but Tally, again, we're back to the point of people, actually elected Democrats, do respect the Constitution and do actually have these beliefs of equality under the law, this and that, right? Like,
He's calling Ben Shapiro unprincipled, by the way. He's a hypocrite. He claims to believe in these liberal values, these foundational underpinnings that you're stressing, but he supported Donald Trump, who is currently the White House. They are exploring options as far as potentially arresting and deporting Zoran Mamdani. They're talking about it openly.
Yeah,
And
that's
Elon
insane.
Musk.
I would Listen, if Ben Shapiro came out in support of that, I think that's horrible.
He does,
And-
but I mean,
and-
he
Does he support that?
But, but Tally, no, Hutch.
Right, you know,
No, we can't get sidetracked for the 100th time. Tally, directly address the point that I don't find that there's actually legitimate agreement between these two people.
Sure. So again,
In a meaningful way.
Sure. I think there is, but I hear you. Like they have lots of meaningful differences, right? And the parties that they each are loyal to have radically different approaches, right? And policies. So I agree with you. This gets back to the answer that is not satisfying. I'm seeing a different stratification of politics. And so, and I feel trapped in the middle. Like I see basically, again, on the horseshoe, there's the center, there's the left, there's the right, and then there's the fringes meeting at the other end. Okay. I see myself here basically at the center. I took the political compass and I'm literally slightly below on the libertarian end. I'm right on the center line, on the left edge of the center line. Okay. That was my political compass. And so that's where I see myself basically. And yes, I see more. The frame that I'm looking through is I see more, or I wish to see more agreement, and I see more foundational agreement among the people on this sort of lower half of the horseshoe than the people on the upper half of the horseshoe. Now, maybe I'm schizophrenic, maybe I'm behind, maybe I'm ahead. I don't know, but these are the trends that I'm looking at that are motivating me and concerning me, and all of these things.
Yeah, but Tally, the fringe is sitting in the White House right now. Like, I understand that not everybody that voted for Donald Trump.
To a certain extent, yes. There's people outside of the White House that I'm even more concerned about. But yes, absolutely. Those influences are in the White House. And that's part of what concerns me. Like, you know, like people like Tucker Carlson, like have a direct line. And, you know, to say why am I concerned, like it's, I understand the frustration of like focus more on the politicians and not on like the podcasters and whatever. And that is a fair critique. But also, with the exception of Donald Trump and his obvious name recognition, way more people are listening to what someone like Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson has to say than any of the senators, any of the congressmen. And so I am concerned about influences, cultural influences. Yeah, and that's how I'm looking at the world right now. I don't have an election right now, you know, like we'll how would I vote tomorrow?
Don't you know?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So if we, assuming that everything that Trump has done so far was like guaranteed.
Yeah, so I asked this question of other people who share similar concerns. By the way, the concerns you raise are not, you're not the only people who has these concerns, this kind of view. Econoboy said it. I agree with Econoboy. But the question is asked like this. If you had the power right now to going forward, you see what Trump has done, press a button and new election happens. Let's say it's all constitutional, all legal, so put that aside, and replace Trump with Kamala Harris right now. Would you press that button?
I don't know. I guess like there's a certain part of me that's like, you want to stop the bleeding, right? So like I'm sensitive to that impulse. And the other part of me, again, that you're not, yeah, well, in a literal way, right? Stop the bleeding to be able to stop some of the things that I don't like happening. And also I have real concerns with the left that I don't like, that I think.
But you at least gone from Trump, voting for Trump, to now you're saying, I don't know.
So
isn't that a shift?
Yes, certainly. Yes, that's a shift. So, fuck, I keep forgetting my train of thought. I'm really sorry.
Can I jump in real quick? I want to
Yes.
say something because you appealed to the foundational, like we're talking about, was it big L or small L? But like liberal democracy, we talk about these, like Western liberal democracy, we talk about these foundational principles. I submit to you that nobody, maybe this is how I'm going to try to appeal to you, but nobody has challenged these core underpinnings like Donald Trump ever, and it's not even close. When we talk about liberal democracy, what are we talking about? A free and fair press. What is he currently doing? He got CBS to settle for probably millions of dollars over
$16
nothing.
million.
He,
16.
he accused them of editing a Kamala interview in a way that was deceptive and used a different. It was all bullshit. Anybody can watch the video. It's just a lie. When we talk about Western liberal democracy, we talk about free and fair elections. Do I even need to go into detail about how he has challenged this? And on top of that, there's a non-zero chance that he's going to try to invoke some kind of emergency power, and we just don't have an election in 2028. Anybody who doesn't think that's possible or just not paying attention. When we talk about a free and fair election, we talk about like the rule of law. Look at the assault on the rule of law currently right now with him just consistently. How many times has he ignored the courts at this point who have compelled him to return people to the country so that they can have due process? I mean, how many of these foundational underpinnings does he need to just fully assault before you might come to the conclusion that this guy is just bad news? If you care about
and
the value
right.
worse,
of
and
this
to be
Hold
clear,
on,
because
you're
she
right.
does think he's bad news. To be
No,
clear,
that was very
it's relative
compelling.
worse news.
That's very compelling. That's very compelling. So let me that's very compelling. I agree with you. I don't have any good response, nor do I want to counter that. I agree with you.
I could keep going, by the way. I mean, we could
let me just
Shut
so
up,
with the question of like, would I tomorrow change and vote for Kamala? And my apprehension, right? And again, this is not going to satisfy anyone. Blah blah blah. I'm concerned essentially with the direction of both parties, and I feel like what I'm trying to do is just like rattle it back and forth to try to try to keep it somewhere in the center. And I know that's not happening, right? If anything, it's sort of like moving out further, arguably. But my concern is like I have all these concerns with the left, that if the left maintains power, basically, right, this election was a check on the left's power, that I worry that the thing that Pisco didn't like, not that I'm saying they deserved it, but essentially like I want a reform, I want a change, I want an ideological movement, and I know, and which is why I stepped back from the Democratic Party, because the Democrats don't owe
You
me
want to force them to change.
ideological change, right? And they don't owe me that, frankly, right? Maybe I'm just the one that changed. Which, by
can
the
I
way, was a
posit-
really hard thing for me to accept. You know, there's a lot of people who go out there and do the whole the left me thing, right? And that's very appealing. And I don't feel that way. I feel like I changed, and
But
it's
I just wanna-
it's a hard thing to grapple with.
Wick
But I
after Hutch.
just want to validate you. You watch my stream, so you know I have so many concerns about the excesses of the left. We'll be gentle and phrase it that way. But I just want to invite you over to where I'm sitting, because I still find myself, I still feel like I have a place in the Democratic Party. I'm still proud to call myself a Democrat. I mean, the party's we're in a bit of a jam right now, but to me, like I am so firm in my decision to be in this coalition right now. I would just try to appeal to a sense of like people. I think people, maybe we take for granted these institutions and this sort of like form of government that we have, but we are not immune to a 1930s German style backslide. That could happen in America, and if it does, it would be a nightmare that would eclipse the fucking Third Reich, the Nazi Party. It would be worse if fascism succeeded in this country. And for all of the complaints that I have about these psychotic lefties that are just the worst people you could possibly imagine, none of that to me comes close to the. What's that?
I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you, at least in what they've been able to like materialize, or at least like, you know, how much power, let's say, these extremist groups on each side have been able to gain. I agree with you that is a more like a more tangible concern, potential harm, let's say, right?
Called
Immediate
triage.
you could say. Sure, yes, there you go, immediate triage. However, I also view the reactionary right as a reaction to the left. So I'm going to just stop prefacing everything with, I know it's going to be unpopular, but there were liberals, heterodox liberals throughout, before I had my ideological shift and since, who were saying for many years, maybe it's not a great thing to push race consciousness. Maybe telling a bunch of aggrieved white men that they are white first and their whiteness is their inherent sin, and that, you know, we need to eradicate whiteness, and don't worry, the country is going to all turn brown soon. People are reacting to that. And I don't like that reaction, right? They are reacting in a similar and opposite identitarian
Reciprocal
way, like
radicalization is a term.
right, right, exactly. And so that concerns me basically. So yes, I agree. The more pressing concern is fascism from the left, from the right, than socialism from the left right now. But I do think these forces are feeding each other.
Go ahead, Wick.
What I would add to Hutch's point, and this is perhaps my strongest argument to you, given what I understand about your positions and how you feel and why you voted how you did, that your vote for Trump empowered the far left, the extreme left, the hateful left, the left that you don't like, right? It gave them a power, because reciprocal radicalization, that's how it works, right? They need each other to feed. If Trump had not won, they would have less influence in the Democratic Party. They would have less influence on leftist politics or progressive politics or democratic politics, because there would be nothing for them to be empowered to oppose, right? A lot of the reasons that we gave them a seat at the table initially is because we were afraid of Trump in his first term, right? So we're like, oh my God, Clinton lost and our minds broke. And so, we got to empower our crazies too. And so we gave a lot of power to the extreme left, right? To say, okay, here's the weapons, go get them, boys, right? And unfortunately, they didn't leave, right? They didn't do it. Like they took key positions, I would argue, of influence in our cultural institutions, which led to like the rise of wokeism and things like that, and an overblowing and overcorrection. I think peaked in like 2020 Summer of Love type of deal, right? So when you vote for the other guys to teach the Democrats a lesson and try to reform them, I think it's having the opposite effect, and I fear it's having the opposite effect.
Totally.
I fear what it's doing is it's giving like
it's a great point, because it's the exact point that I made. So if they're feeding each other, it's feeding in the other direction too. So
what would make that the best way, in my opinion, to counteract the far extremists is vote for the more moderate candidate. And Kamala was that. Whether you like her policies or not, Kamala was that. And I think that the Democrats coming up, hopefully, my lips to God's ears, continue down a moderate path. Because
it's not
if
going
we
to
go
happen,
extreme, we're going to lose.
Right.
We're going extreme, we're going to lose right again and again and again. J.D. Vance is going to whip our asses, and it's going to be...
I'm not convinced by that. But I'm not convinced by that.
I should say that Wick is pulling for Cinema Mansion 2028.
Shapiro.
Josh
Shapiro. Josh Shapiro is my man. He has bipartisan support in Pennsylvania, which is a swing state. Like, my God, his numbers are great. My MAGA friends
but I don't know if that's ideological. I think it has to do with Josh Shapiro's competency, other things like that. But I want to say,
great. Let's elect competent people. Let's nominate competent people.
You're putting it as though it's ideological.
Party. Please, please, for the love of God.
I think
please, I'm begging you.
I would quibble with some of the things that I would quibble with some of the framing. I would quibble with some of the framing that Wick does for like his whole narrative there, but I largely agree that look at where the energy is now. And I'm just gonna be honest with you, I like you, but I'm gonna spend my time energizing the people who have the momentum behind them, and that is people who want the Democrat Party to fight more and stronger and be more stalwart advocates against the Trump administration. For you it matters, right? The kind of anti-Zionist tack that the Democratic Party, or that some people in your inner circle or whatever the group had, like, look at the polling numbers for Israel. It's abysmal among the Democratic Party. There's been a shift. Harry Anton pointed to it. I don't know if you saw it. There was like a plus 17 among Democrats in favor of Israel versus Palestine in terms of who you're more sympathetic with. Now it's like plus 56 Palestinians among Democrats. That is an enormous shift, and it has to do both, I think, with you're empowering a radical that is Trump, and you're empowering, by extension, Bibi Netanyahu. And what's going on in Israel is just making people more antagonistic to Zionism and to the Israeli state. How could this be the best thing for the future of the country?
I think you're right.
There's
about
a lot
that,
there. I think you're right too. We have to kind of decide how much we want to talk about this topic. But I agree. It's very logical that people would feel more sympathy towards Palestine than Israel right now. That seems warranted. That seems right. Palestinians are suffering exponentially more than Israelis.
But it's caused something else. It's causing not just more sympathy, but explicitly anti-Zionism in a way that you've never seen among the Democratic Party.
Right.
You
I
say
think-
that Zionism, yeah.
I don't think anti-Zionism it's not a coherent political movement. It's basically so the word Zionist, right? When we used in the beginning, Hutch had me define it, right? Because it's true. Everyone means something different when they're using that word. And it's become so bastardized, and it's really almost exclusively used as a slur. It's like either used by people who call themselves Zionists, right? Or by everyone else as a slur. And so I've made pitches to Jews before. Zionism to me basically is not a necessary word, right? It's like the belief that that Israel should exist as a Jewish state, which it is now, right? So it's just not wanting Israel to dissolve basically is Zionism, right? And like there's Zionism also was an actual movement to establish a state of Israel, and it succeeded. And then, it's like, so the term to me seems really only problematic because it's only used in this, I see it as a weapon. And I've tried to make this pitch to Jews of like, we should just stop using it, like make them say what they mean, Israeli, Jew, Jew who supports Israel, right? Person who supports Israel. And that has not been a very effective pitch. And then it makes me wish that people like Hutch, and you don't even need to respond to this, Hutch, because I'm not trying to put you in trouble here, but people like Hutch who do believe that, Israel has a right to exist, those people who are not ideological extremists or whatever should call themselves Zionists. It's like I don't see a better way, because the word it feels like an unprincipled. It's just a way to say like I don't like the suffering of Palestine, or rather, there's so many different things that people are saying when they use this term, and a lot of anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic. It's steeped in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. The terror attacks, the two terror attacks.
I hear you. I'm not talking about.
Hold on. The two terror attacks of the Israeli embassy workers and the older people marching for the hostages.
In Boulder, yeah.
Those were, in my opinion, anti-Semitic attacks. I mean, they were targeting Jews, right? They were targeting Jews specifically, but also very reasonably called anti-Zionist attacks. They're motivated by a political animus against people who with an affinity towards Israel, right?
Sure, it can be both.
So anti-Zionism, yes, it's something that I'm very concerned with. I don't feel like Jews have a lot of control over what's going to happen. This I could doom spiral about this a little bit. I don't like what the right is doing. Not only does it make me cringe, there's a lot of people who take up the I'm against anti-Semitism thing as a way of just like owning the libs. It's just this negative polarization. It's, oh, the left is, quote unquote, the left is being anti-Semitic, so we're going to be like, oh no, we really love the Jews. I think the trying to make a special carve out for anti-Semitic hate speech is terrible, because I don't believe
Trump is doing that though, by the way. Trump is doing that on the campuses.
Of course, that's my point. That's why I'm bringing it up. I think that's bad, very bad. Because it infringes on people's First Amendment rights, okay? And B, because I think it promotes anti-Semitism. It feeds the conspiracy theorists who say this is the one group you're not allowed to talk about. And now Trump's being like, yeah, it's true. You actually can't talk about this group. So all of these things, I am not optimistic.
I know, but I'm getting to Wick's point, right? So Wick's point was,
Jews in America.
I'm hopeful that I think that the anti-Semitism issue is a humongous issue. I'm hopeful that we can get past it. I think it's a big problem. I agree with that. I just want to say that I'm not getting the merits of Zionism or anti-Zionism. I'm kind of pointing to Wick's point, which is, for better or worse, you try to send a message with that vote, and it hasn't had that effect. The kind of protest vote situation has not made the Democratic Party like more moderate in the way that you would define it. I think that the energy has been that now there's I think a liberal and lefty coalition, and by the way, I'm going to exploit that, and I'm going to be in favor of it. Yeah.
Let me flip an interesting question to you now before
Sure.
I lose it. So does that mean that all of the people who protested voting for Kamala, the lefties who protested voting for Kamala, that they made a good decision actually?
A humongous
because
error.
They've empowered the wing of the left that they want to see in power. They have
Exactly what they
given
wanted to happen is
their
happening.
At the cost of at
don't
the
care.
cost of the
Why would
body,
they
like
care?
bodies and potential fait accomplis. Because at the end of the day, I don't think that America, or I think that a lot of what Israel is going to be doing, they've been left off the leash. And so maybe in the long term, just like it could be the case that the attack on October 7th ends up in a causality that ends up in a Palestinian state. But I would never be like, well, then Hamas wins or something. I don't know. It would be through a huge astronomical cost that includes like where the borders end up and like potentially thousands and thousands of lives, and maybe even like a broader escalation in Iran. I don't think that that's over yet. And so yeah, I know perhaps that they were successful in shifting the party. But again, I'm just saying, I don't think that the message, you can't plan, these protest messages aren't going to work out the way you always think. And it might send the wrong signal.
Sure, I agree with you. And I agree with you. And this is like I think that's compelling. Okay, I think that's really compelling because it's my argument in the opposite direction, and I believe they're feeding each other, so it just is then true in the other direction. So it makes sense that the more fringes or the more radical elements of the left are gaining power as a result of this. My protest vote was to show up as almost every county in the country did, as like moving right, and I did hope that would send a signal to the Democrats that people are not moving left, but are in fact moving right, and that would encourage moderation. But you're right, that's not what's happening. But then I don't know what to do because I wasn't happy with the direction that the party was going into. So
voted for the woman, voted for the black, amazing, joyful woman. That's what you should have done.
Go ahead.
I understand that's
frankly,
what
yes. Frankly, yes.
I
you
obviously
should have.
get that's what you guys believe. Yeah,
frankly,
I obviously understand that.
I do think that, again, given that you are worried about this extremism on the fringes, I warn the right all the time, right? That if you are going to go extreme, the left is going to counter you by going more extreme, right? So beware what you do. I told this to the left as well. Hey, if you keep going extreme, the right's going to counter you. So if you want a more moderate politic, vote for moderate candidates. That's the only way to turn down the temperature. The only way. If people keep going to the radical extreme side because they have to counter the other side, it's going to create, again, a reciprocal radicalization effect, right? This is very studied, right? This is a common thing. Yeah. We see this all the time across all sorts of issues, right? So my worry here, my concern is that we are going to every side is going to keep weaponizing its crazies to fight the other. We're going to see each other as enemies. So Tali, my advocacy to you is that the less extreme candidates going forward in the midterms coming up, because we can't change your vote. Like, we can't actually go back in time. There is no button we can press to change your vote. But what we can do is talk to you about what's coming up in the midterms, right? The candidates are going to be on the ballot in the Senate and in the Congress, and how we can use those seats to moderate and act as a block to the Trump administration, which you agree is going too far in a wide variety of issues, right? That we've talked about all the time, right? You don't like their attacks and assaults on various things. You don't like the empowerment of the extreme right, the Tucker Carlsons, etc., right? So the moderates in Congress that are coming up for election in the midterms, right? Can we commit you, or at least commit you to thinking about voting for them? Can we do that?
Yeah, I mean, those are going to be local elections, right? Where
Congress,
it's going to be
Senate.
It's going to be district elections for the House of Representatives and the statewide elections in terms of senators.
Right. My point to just being that's gonna vary, right, depending on where the person lives. So
you,
sure. If there are, I know. But what I'm saying is, like, yeah, if there's a moderate, sensible candidate out there, yeah, I would vote for them.
I want to make the case that Donald Trump, this has been an ongoing project for him. He's been remarkably successful. He has, for years now, been pushing the very moderates that you're appealing to out of the party. He is remaking the entire Republican Party in his image, which is thoroughly corrupt. He does represent, I think, an existential threat to the Republic, literally to the Constitution. So I think, like, right now, when we were talking about triage, I think the correct move, I invite you to explore this possibility is to wholly reject the Republican Party. Straight ticket. Do not vote for a single one of them for as long as MAGA is in the driver's seat.
Yeah,
And you can maybe 10 years from now, they start to moderate. You start seeing more Jeff Flakes and fucking Susan Collins or whatever. And then, I'm not going to like morally judge you for supporting those candidates. But like right now, I think we're in a really serious moment.
Yeah, we could probably, if you guys want, start like doing like closing statements, and Talia, you'll get the last word on this. I think it's important. We'll give the second to last word to Wick. So Conaboy and Pisco and I will go. Do either of you want to go? Pisco, Conaboy?
I'll start.
Yeah, you guys can go first. I don't care.
I'll just say, listen, it was great talking to you. I hear a lot of familiar patterns in what you say. I'm not saying that everything you say is repetitive. Some of it actually, I think, hit home to me in terms of I had a similar experience in college when I would never say that I'm anti-woke or anything, but I was taking a strong stance against identitarianism at a time when, I had Hispanic friends and stuff who were like, what the fuck? So I understand people can feel personally ostracized, and I would just ask maybe for you to like look at the people that you respect, right? You respect Desnet, you respect Richard Hanania. They have both taken a position against Trump, one before and one after. And I would just like what is it about their stances and why I respect them that they've come to this conclusion? What about their decision do I disagree? I think that you're conscious enough to know that a lot of it is vibes based, a lot of it's cultural. I would just like be like, I don't know, formalize it in some way. What would it take for me to admit that either it was wrong or that I'll do something different in the future? But in general, I thought it was great talking to you. I really appreciate your perspective, and things got heated when I yelled a little bit at Wick, but no hard feelings, and love you guys very much.
Conaboy?
Yeah, great discussion. Yeah, guys, sometimes we yell at each other. It's okay. It's not a big deal, obviously, but love the conversation. Huge, incredibly deep disagreements pretty much across the board. But I think that one of the big takeaways is that, certainly I think if we're talking about being a coalition partner, one of my big things is that I don't think that you'll find nearly as much ostracization from like grass touching, actually existing kind of democratic groups. I think if you were to go to, for instance, I don't know where you live, obviously, but if you were to go to like a county Democratic Party meeting or something like that, I don't think that this would be nearly the same space as the type of activist space that you existed in previously. And I think that that's probably reflective of how Democrats generally govern. I mean, like one of the arguments that you'll hear from like so many of these activist spaces is that they hate Democrats. Why do they hate Democrats? Right? Because Democrats don't go nearly as far as they want. Right? And I'm a radical. Like I'm on the far left of the party. Obviously, I want the Democrats to go way further, but I also recognize that moderates are a part of the Democratic coalition, and I wouldn't say that we should excise all it just wouldn't be feasible to do so. It's coalition politics, right? So at the same time that people like Mamdani win in New York, there's going to be people like, every now and then you're going to have the mansions and the cinemas of the world that win in their respective areas. And, that's just understandable. Hopefully we can just meet somewhere in the middle of like the left of center spectrum, because I certainly would say that, look, government in this country, when it's compromises between the Democratic Socialists and Progressives and the moderate Democrats, that is a way more comfortable space to live in, right? Than when we're compromising between the white nationalists, if you don't want to say Nazi, the white nationalists, right wing, bigoted right, and, the center right, which apparently doesn't have much courage to challenge the far extremity of the party anyway, right? Which is really tough, I think. I think that's a much kind of more precarious place to live, I guess, especially if we care, like Josiah said, about those kind of very fundamental liberal values. I just didn't see Joe Biden doing these attacks on free speech or the press or, political organizing. When there were protests and stuff like that, it's like 200 people protest and we're sitting in the National Guard. That didn't happen under Joe Biden, right? It just seems like certainly it's better to it just exists in general under Democrats and that coalition than the Republicans and theirs. But it was a good conversation nonetheless.
Yeah, so as far as I'm concerned, Tally, I grew up with in rural Kentucky, and I was surrounded by actual like conservatives and mostly Republicans, and most of them are MAGA to this day. I've got sisters who are MAGA. I mean, I'm just used to being around people with whom I disagree. And nothing you said here was particularly offensive. I think the disconnect, I can't speak for the others, but for me is I don't do culture war stuff. Culture war is irrelevant to me. I actually have, I make fun of it a lot on my channel. I'm like, if all you care about is what shoes the green M&M wears while USAID is being cut and we're having cuts on Medicaid, I think you're missing the forest for the trees. That is my prism, okay? And I think that's probably where the disconnect is. I can't empathize because the things that you are concerned with, I'm genuinely not, particularly when it comes time to voting. That's the real thing.
I'm
I don't
not
see a direct
concerned with the
connection.
color of the shoes of the green M&Ms.
Well, that's just my bullshit. Tucker Carlson bitched about that for about a year.
Right.
Did you know that
And-
they're changing the
yes,
shoes on the
and I
green
am-
M&M? It's like,
Right. And I'm
Minecraft
very
yourself, please.
concerned with the culture war, and I'm not concerned with the skin color of Disney princesses. And that's like
There's a
I
black
hope
elf
that
in the
would
Lord of the
be
Rings thing. Like, just
obvious,
miss
yeah.
me with that. So I that is not what my channel is about. It's not content, and it's genuinely not just something that I tend to contemplate. And so, and to Wick's point, I know that that is a big thing for a lot of people, and that's why I stay out of it, because I genuinely don't care about it and am incapable of dealing with it. So that's where I think we were missing each other. I took what you said at face value, which is that you were not making an affirmative case or vote for Trump. It was a protest thing against the Democrats. I hear that a lot. I hear that from people in real life, offline. And that's why I was just trying to make the case that Trump is worse than you expected. He's as bad or worse on many of the things you claim to care about. In authenticity, for example, he's lied more than Joe Biden has ever lied. He's lied more than Kamala Harris has ever lied. He changes his position all the time. He's not ideologically a fascist, but he embodies the worst elements of fascism, which makes fascism possible in his party. And so moving forward, I would encourage you to just re-examine the prism when it comes time to your vote. You can still care about, the broader culture issues and identitarianism, but I would encourage you when it comes time to vote, think of the party itself. And the politicians as well, and the specific policies. That's what I was trying to make the case, that just you're better off, as Econoboy has said, and Hutch has said, and Pisco has said, creating a circumstances where Democrats govern, because Joe Biden didn't do most of the stuff that upsets you. Joe Biden, again, I know Israel came up quite a bit. Joe Biden was the most pro-Zionist president ideologically in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I can't stress enough. Support for Israel is not a
No,
factor
I know it's not like
in my
outcome
vote.
determinative or anything like that. I'm just saying, all these
Level
things.
of anti-Semitism within the party is something that weighs more on my vote than the particular president's support for the state of Israel.
Right.
I have some studies to show you about that.
Yeah.
But,
So yeah, it sounds like Pisco wants to hash that out with you, but that's what I would just invite you to do is perhaps think of it truly as a political thing and not a cultural thing in terms of your vote. And I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think you can do as Destiny has done, as Hutch has done, which is, sound the alarm about what you view as the excesses of the left and still vote for the Democratic Party, which is less authoritarian, is more free speech, and all of these things. That's what I would encourage you to do. But I appreciate you coming here. And so I'll give Wick the next word, and then you get to close
Does
us
Hutch
out.
not get a turn?
What about Hutch?
I thought
Fuck me,
Hutch
right?
did. I thought you were.
Wow.
Hutch, my bad.
Fuck me, right?
Bro,
Is that your
I'm sorry,
catchphrase?
Hutch.
Okay, I'm used to it. It's fine.
No, fuck you. No, I thought you were
No.
do it because you did the first invitation. You did the first eloquent
Friends
closing
with
thing. I'm
the
sorry.
fam.
Go
No,
ahead.
Hutch has to get the
Yeah,
rest
you
to
go.
say. So
You
I
go,
mean, I'll
bro.
keep it brief. Listen,
No, go ahead.
it sounded like you were a bit self-conscious in the beginning. I just want to clarify for me, and I'm pretty sure this is the case for my co-host as well, but I didn't go into this with some preconceived notion of who you are. I'm not thinking about the last election, to be honest with you. What's done is done. And I don't Josiah said it really well, where it's like, I don't need you to feel regret. That's not really anything that matters right now. And I would just say that I appreciate you coming into this forum. It can be kind of overwhelming if you're not used to this. And I won't name any names, but some people in chat are just fucking hostile, and it's crazy. And so I'm appreciative of the fact that you came on and you seem like an open-minded person. I think that's a genuine open-mindedness. I think it's a genuine curiosity. And at the end of the day, like if we don't convince you, we don't convince you. It is what it is. But I just want to stress that the stakes of this moment, I think, are very, very high. I think in many ways we live in the most pivotal moment in the last like 75 years. You know, I think you'd have to go back to like the 60s to really pick another time in history that mattered more in this moment. There's an inflection point. Like we can either go in this direction over here or something that I think is really quite dark and existential. And so you know, I'm not gonna judge you, and if you want to be a part of this, then come on over. Yeah.
So, first, thank you actually for having us on. I do appreciate it. It's your house, your rules, right? I enjoyed the conversation somewhat, but I would be remiss if I did not say this was a very, very frustrating conversation for several reasons. We talk about inauthenticity on the left, right? And what I felt, it might not be true, but this is the impression that was given. You guys had kid gloves on the whole time. If you think she's retarded, call her retarded. If you think she's retarded, call her retarded. If you think she's retarded, call her retarded. And I can't stress this enough. You guys, well, I don't want to really, you're treating her like, well, I don't really want to make you feel regret or anything. And it's not important. You're still
I don't
a
think that
good
was
person
my
and things
attitude
like
at all,
that.
to be fair.
You guys
Maybe these
came
other
off-
three posers,
hold on,
but
you
not
guys
me,
came off
goddammit.
as very inauthentic, frankly. Okay, you did. You simply did. Like, in this whole thing, it felt false. And I don't know how else to stress that people would rather have a screaming match with you than feel like you were lying to them.
Dude, fuck you. Honestly,
Good.
fuck you.
Yes,
You're
this
go,
is the energy
go to
we
hell.
want.
No.
So why do you bring that
on the
against
one
me?
hand?
Not
On the one hand, so this is so fucking performative from fucking Wick. So Wick is like, oh, you can't yell at people. You were doing her with guilt. Oh my god. And now you're gonna fucking you're doing this posting like we were treating her with kid gloves when Econoboy was going hard on her. I was pointing out what I view were contradictions. You are so full of shit, and you're wherever the wind blows. So if we were too berating on her, you'd be like, oh my god, all these men ganging up on her, and you know you're making her feel guilty. And now you're saying we had
what
kid gloves on.
Can I take
Fuck
that's gonna be best
you.
for content? Which way is the wind blowing here? That's
I
what's
think
happening
the
right now.
screaming.
And
I think the
it's
screaming
very-
match probably would have been
If I
better
may.
for content. Wick,
If I
I
may.
disagree on that.
If I may, right? If I may, right? Well, you have brand risk and brand concerns as well as that. But I think that when it comes down to what did we learn tonight? And I fear we learned nothing. And that is my frustration with the panel. But I love you guys. I do, even if I hate you, right? And I think that we should really come to terms with the fact that Democrats are in a bad spot. They're in a bad spot right now, okay? We have to figure out why they are in that spot, what we can do to fix it, and then we have to implement the changes necessary to do so. And that is both on a policy level and a cultural level. And I think we can't ignore one for the other, and we mistake often how influential randos on the internet or randos in people's lives can be. And perhaps it wasn't the case with Tolly, but I know many people who were simply turned off because they were treated like shit by the other side.
You just told me to call her.
Yeah,
regardless.
real. I'm stunned. Before we go to Tally, like you threw a
So
firecracker
stupid.
there, so I'm curious. Like,
Do you not understand the difference?
I do. I think that there.
No, I actually don't understand the difference. I think it's fucking stupid. It's
hold on.
I know.
think
I know.
they're- yeah.
This is part of the problem. You don't, right? Like this is part of
You're
the problem.
accusing me of insincerity. You think that I'm just sitting here boiling with contempt for her, and I'm not.
No.
That
No,
is
I think
my
you were one of the
authentic
more like Hutch out of all these people. Well, I met Josiah in real life. Josiah and I are boys, right? But Hutch, out of all these people, I think we are closest aligned, right, in temperament.
You said he was
Things like
fucking
that.
shaming her. You said he was.
He
guilting
was!
Her. What? So what? So is Hutch now immune from your criticism because you guys are boys? What are you talking about? You're so full of shit.
Do you understand how I can be much more temperamentally inclined towards Hutch, but still he think he did something that I wouldn't agree with in one case?
Yes, I understand that.
Okay, great, awesome. That's all that's happened here. So to imply that this is like, oh, you have one criticism of Hutch, that means you must hate Hutch, is just silly. Again, authenticity. I can't claim this enough. One of the reasons Destiny is so effective, like him or not, It's because you know what you're getting with that Destiny. He would have called Tolly a cuck. He would have called Tolly a terrible person. He would have
No,
called
Destiny.
Tolly retarded.
Destiny's
I
conversational
think that might have been
strategies
more
vary.
effective.
And we
No,
should have done that.
respectfully,
And we should have
yeah.
done that. We should
If
have done
that's
that.
what
Wick.
you feel, yes.
Oh, bro.
Oh my God.
So, okay.
Well,
listen
to
me.
be fair, I was really hoping that the conversation would go in a direction that they didn't think that I was retarded and terrible,
Fair enough.
even if they strongly disagree with me.
Yeah, I think that we made it clear we strongly disagree and are often perplexed by her worldview. I don't understand most of it. I understand some of it because I've heard it before from family members. But yes, I'm not like it would have probably been better content had we just screamed at her, 4-on-1, 5-on-1 the entire time. But that's not the point. Like I thought this was like a conversation with a random, Trump voter with whom we disagree. Yeah, I'm not going to scream at somebody. Now, if it's somebody like Lactoid, that I have a history with, that I enjoy sparring with, and it's a 1-on-1, it's not a 5v1 against like 4. Of course, I'll send him a fuck you. I don't know this girl. I don't know who she is. So yeah, I do not apologize.
I told Pisco to shut the fuck up multiple times this episode.
Exactly. And honestly, that was quite
a
frankly
woman
the
just
highlight.
Tell her
Not a girl.
once when
I'm
she
not going to
needed
tell
be
Tally.
told.
Tally,
Frankly.
maybe on our second conversation, I will tell you to shut the fuck up, okay? If that makes you feel any better, but not on our first, okay? Like, yeah.
She was giving it back. I felt that. I think you're trying. I actually think this is really sinister from Wick. I think Wick is trying to. I think this is actually really sinister. I think you're trying to concoct a sexism angle. That's why it's so incoherent. You're trying to play. Wait, is it sexism if they treat her very differently and they're like really not mean to her, or is it sexism when they like are giving her retreat gloves? So you're trying to concoct some kind of sexism angle, and that's why you're not making any fucking sense, boy.
You think that sexism, out of all the words I said, sexism
I think you're trying to
is the one you
concoct
got.
that narrative, and that's why
Sexism is the one you
that's
got.
why you're not making sense. That's why
Well,
you're not
I
making sense.
dislike women, but I'm
What?
going to put that aside for this conversation. Like an
That's
adult.
very big of you that you're
Like
able
a
to separate
grown-up
your side
does,
from
you know.
your
Me too.
misogyny. Yeah.
I don't understand how you how you got to sexism from anything I
You want to
said.
have a conversation about this conversation, and you can't really articulate what's the problem here. Is the problem that we were too mean, or that we weren't mean enough, we weren't authentic enough? I thought we were authentic.
I said it
for
3
you, it's like
times in
it's
a row.
only authentic.
Inauthentic. Did I
Okay.
stutter?
In what respect? Show me where like we're using the R slur as other people. Like in what? You're on a show called Live and Learn, where like the most I don't know violent we'll get at each other is when like Econoboy and Hutch are arguing about like should we include lefties or not, and it's never what you're saying. So you just don't have a good comprehension of the show, and you think that we're being inauthentic when we're being our authentic selves.
Every single one of you, one-on-one and in other venues, and you do not act like
This
you
is
did
not a
tonight.
debate. This was not a debate. It's different if it's a debate in like a conversation where she's outnumbered
I've
5 to 1.
had conversations that are not debates with all of you, one-on-one in various venues. They did not act like you acted tonight.
Which was what? Which is like not ourselves, is what you're saying.
Yes, inauthentic.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, Wick, to be clear, there was like an exact analog to this with me personally when I debated Joe Lewis on your show about essentially why he doesn't support voting for Democrats. And like, I just don't recall calling Joe Lewis a dumb fuck or a retard or an asshole during that. That was like a 2-hour discussion. And I mean, I remember acting substantially the same way. I mean, I don't know, Wick. You've lost the plot on this one, Wick. You've lost the plot on this one.
I'm just saying,
Hey guys,
like,
go
people-
watch that debate
people
between
look
me
at
and
these
Joe, and you
things
tell me
and they make their
if I act
judgments,
differently.
and I guess we'll see, right? But
Tolly's been waiting to give her
I do
closing statement
appreciate
for-
being on here, and I do appreciate. I think part of the problem is I look at this and I view it as there's a car and we're all in a car because I want to preface this. It's very
Pisco is
important.
grinding his teeth.
It's very important that we win in the midterms. It is very important. It is the most important thing that we win in the midterms. We have to take back the House and the Senate if we can, right? Nothing else is more important than that, right? I think we can all agree on that at least, right? That is a touchstone that we can agree
Yes,
on.
we
What
do.
I am seeing,
Authentically.
and it's not just you guys, I see this all the time. I am seeing the Democrats, right, and the left in general, driving towards a big fat fucking L. A big fat fucking L. And I'm like, we gotta swerve. We gotta turn. We gotta do something. put on the brakes. Something has to be done. And you're just driving off a cliff to the biggest L of our lives. And it's the biggest cell phone because there is never a better time where we can take a W.
You want to bet $50
policies
that
of Trump are going to
Hey,
devastate this country,
you want to
and
bet $50
people are
that
going
the
to hurt.
Democrats are going to fuck
And
them
to
up?
take a L to Trump under those circumstances is going to be very, very.
Let's bet $50. Let's bet $50. I think the Democrats are going to fuck them up in the midterms.
$50.
$50.
You got to define a parameters, guy. What does it mean to are Democrats?
The last time a man
be a
challenged
blue
Wick
wave.
like
It's gonna be a
this,
blue
he
wave.
backed down.
It's
He
gonna be a
fled
blue
in
wave.
terror.
True.
You're-
Andrew Wilson
Yeah.
put up $20,000 to
I'm
take
still
me
waiting for
on,
my
right? And then
$10
I
from
gave
Hutch,
him
by
a
the way.
date, and he never said shit.
Hutch will
Right?
take that
Never
10,000
said
and
shit.
raise you.
Listen, they're going to kick millions of people off of healthcare. It's going to happen. They're going to do it like fucking tonight. And
The
they're
problem
going
is
to get
if
fucked
we
up.
change, look, Hutch, you're correct if we change course. If we don't change course, you're incorrect. And I don't know if we're going to change course because right now we are having a struggle session, right? In the left on the Democratic Party. There is a wrestle for control and a path forward of what our messaging is going to be, what our rhetoric is going to be, how we're going to approach people, how we're going to approach different things, what we will do. If we choose correctly, if we go the Wick way, okay, we will win. If we go the Pisco route, we're going to lose.
What's my route? What's my route? What are you talking? You're just taking shit at me because I yelled at you. There's no like actual point there. If you take the Pisco route,
It's because you want AOC and he wants a moderate type. That's what he's saying. He's like,
is that what you're referencing?
Yeah,
if you
it's
want a
route where you
radical
can wear
or someone who
sombreros
is on
and
the
not be
far
racist.
left, then yes, that is a recipe for disaster.
AOC's the radical. Okay.
I think AOC is much more radical than the people I would choose, like Josh Shapiro. He's a main guy on my mind right now. I probably could think of more if I.
That's your fucking Pennsylvania bias coming in.
Bashir might be okay, right?
Let's get Tally's closing statement.
Yeah,
We're
come on,
talking
come on.
about
Anyway, but yeah, okay. I have a problem, and see, the authentic thing is to actually share and go with the energy that you feel, and I did. Tally, go ahead.
Yeah, God damn it, Tally. There you go. I've just yelled at her. Come on, go ahead. You can give your closing statement.
Thank you. I thought I'm really happy with the way this went. I appreciate that it wasn't so adversarial. I think that was more effective. I hear Wick on the authenticity thing, but I didn't feel like anyone was really being inauthentic. I saw Econoboy has a very bad poker face, so like his reactions were telling me a lot, but I don't think he was being inauthentic in anything that he said to
reactions.
me. Yes, very authentic facial reactions. There were a lot of compelling points here, and I'm glad that we got to. I know that there's frustrations. I need to work on articulating, my worldview in a quick and digestible way, especially when I'm trying to go through like a years-long process here. But I feel like for the most part, you guys met me where I was at, and I think.
Who was your favorite?
Hutch, you were the most compelling, but that's not surprising because I'm already a Hutch fan. No, really, this was
Now we're
great
gonna have to deal
with
with that
everyone.
forever. Thank you, Tally. We're gonna have to deal with his ego.
No, but it's. I messaged Hutch like after that panel that we were on together, and I was just like, "Oh, I would love to talk to you about this kind of stuff," but I actually feel like it's bad for Hutch. Like, I think there's going to be people that are going to be angry with Hutch that someone like me, a Trump voter, likes.
I
Hutch.
don't.
Oh,
give a
if you-
fuck.
I know
if you
you
watch
don't give
his
a fuck,
show-
and I respect
if you
Hutch.
watch his show,
She's just
people-
correct here.
Exactly.
If you watch his
Exactly.
show, everybody's mad at Hutch at various points. You're
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Right, but I didn't want to contribute to that. So I think there were compelling points, and again, speaking to what I see as the concerns, because I wish, even though you guys disagree, I wished you would have maybe taken on more when I was, and maybe I didn't explain myself perfectly, but taken on more when I'm saying I'm sort of looking at a different dynamic, right? I'm not just looking at right and left. I'm looking at this horseshoe and sort of the top and the bottom of this horseshoe. And so speaking to me about the isolationism and the anti-interventionism and the withholding of foreign aid and stuff on the right speaks to me, but I share some of those same concerns on the left. And the right has power right now, and they're the ones enacting this, right? So I don't have a perfect answer right here, and I am compelled by, now that we've seen what's happened so far in the Trump administration, lesser of two evils, and changing my analysis. So these things are compelling to me. I appreciate this. I don't know how to overcome. I guess like the problem too is like, I'm just not convinced. I guess, like, sure, Democrats want my vote, and people who don't want Trump in power want my vote. And it's not all about me, blah, blah, blah. But I think I represent some cohort of people. I don't actually know that, like, my views are wanted in the Democratic Party. I don't know really if they do fit. That doesn't mean that I shouldn't vote for them, right? That doesn't mean that I shouldn't do my own analysis. Yeah, I don't know. Does that resonate with anybody? I hope you guys hear where I'm coming from. And again, I was really nervous about this conversation. I did think that it was going to be blood sports craziness, and I'm glad that it wasn't. Because on just a personal level, I mean, ain't no one wants to be hated.
Not
like that,
Wick.
but on personal,
Wick is fucking mad it wasn't blood
Wick,
sports.
Wick's trying to feed you to the fucking
I want to
wolves.
be clear. Tali, we're going to talk about this later, but I think you're on inauthentic
Whoa.
too. The
Good.
conversations
Well,
we've had
Whoa.
were not represented here.
What is going on? Wick?
Holy fuck!
just
Wait,
saying,
so
this is
wait,
Wick-
you're being
Wick is
unauthentic.
just trying to
taking no
use us.
prisoners.
Wait. You're being
Can we do it
unauthentic
here?
because you're like, oh, I think you're being unauthentic. I'll talk to you about it later. So actually, you're the real sexist.
Wick is actually trying to use us as his puppets, his pawns, as he creates some sort of blood sports arena here. And by the way,
blood sports.
Why was
isn't
she
blood sports.
inauthentic?
If I wanted to
How
be blood
dare you?
sports,
How
we'll
dare
show
you?
you
I
blood
thought you were.
sports. But
Wait, I thought you were being unauthentic. Wait, why are
listen,
you accusing
before you guys get into it, I'm sorry.
Just
Before you guys get into it, I have to make one observation to Tally with what she said. Tally, seriously, I want you to know, because you said Hutch is the most compelling. I actually gave Hutch his answers in a DM privately. Okay, so I just want you to
said
know
you-
that.
Why
Yeah,
would you tell them that though?
I know. Well, now you've been
That's fucked
exposed.
up, man.
Yeah, I bet you feel like a fucking dick now. I'm sorry,
That's
Wick and
fucked
Pisco,
up.
you guys can fight now.
Wait, no,
Yeah,
Josiah,
how
would
should we
you
be
welcome
unauthentic?
Tali? Would you, Josiah? Would you welcome Tali into a coalition without calling her a fucking idiot and blah blah blah?
Sure. At the
or
end
not
of the
just
day,
a fucking idiot, but like a racist and a bit like there are things that I believe that a non-insignificant number of people on the left view as racist and sexist.
You know, we had
and
Brad
bigoted.
Palumbo on the podcast, right? Like we
I
were
just
friendly
got
with
called
him. We
sexist today
Yeah.
by Pisco for I don't know what.
well,
No, I said you were trying to. Well, first of all, I said that you were trying to manufacture sexism.
You're trying to
That's
frame
what I said.
them as
and
race-
and
as
then
sexist.
just then I thought I said you were the
don't
real
understand.
sexist.
I
Just
legit
then
don't
I just said you
understand this.
because you're like, oh, I also think you're inauthentic. You put it, squeeze it in, and be like, but we'll talk about that later.
Because
That
we're
in
to
doing
the
me,
that-
other text
Because
thread.
before
we'll
the
talk about that
conversation,
later.
Tali was like, "Hey, after the panel, can we talk?" And I'm mentioning that because that's what we said. Right, we're gonna do.
Okay. But not.
Well, you know,
not
we're
in
going to
front of
talk
everybody.
after this without you,
You
Wick.
are, and that's okay.
Yeah, you're not invited, Wick.
That's okay.
So the only one who
You're
wasn't
always
inauthentic
invited, fine.
today,
You guys
the
can
only
call
one
it
who
if
wasn't
you want.
inauthentic was Wick. How convenient for you, Wick. You were the only one who was being unauthentic in this whole panel.
That's
You
why
guys
his
are
flag
reading
is
my content,
backwards.
which you might not have. If
I
you
watch
think
your shit.
acted
I'm a Wick
any
fan.
differently
I'm
here
actually a
than
Wick
I
fan,
have
believe it or
in
not.
Any other panel I've been on, or any other venue I've been on, right? Whether they be on my side, against my side, whether they be big names or small names, you're gonna get Wick. You know what you're getting. This is what I'm getting.
I didn't call you inauthentic.
just got Wick, bro.
I just said
You
it's
got
very
Wick.
convenient that
You just wicked
got
you down.
wicked, bro.
Are
You just got
looking
Wick down
at me with
hard.
your glass?
Wick
Listen,
on him.
I don't even hate Wick. I
Put a
don't hate
little
Wick.
Wick on him.
I'm
You
a
don't
Wick
even
fan.
hate Wick.
I'm a
Hey.
Wick fan. I'm a Wick fan. But I
Are
just
you?
want to
You
say
called me a cuck.
I didn't call.
You
Did I
called
call
me
you
a
cuck?
cuck yesterday. Get the
Was
clip,
that
gang.
as a joke? Okay, maybe
Oh,
I called
as
you
a
a cuck.
okay,
it's
but
a
you called me a
meme.
cuck, and it's okay.
It was a meme. It's
But,
a meme.
like, oh, I'm a
you
Wick
say
fan.
words. You say words. We all say
Yesterday,
words.
when I wasn't here and you didn't think I was listening, you called me a cuck.
Cuckoldry is a neutral concept. There's no, it's not
Yes,
like
it's
good or
just
bad.
nothing-
It's
This
just
is
there's
what I
nothing
mean
bad
by
about being a
inauthentic.
cuck.
When
I'm
What's
here
wrong with
to
being a
your
cuck?
face,
What's
just
wrong with being a
call me
cuck?
cuck if you think
What's
I'm a
wrong with being a cuck? What's wrong with being a cuck? I don't remember that I
Nothing's
called you a
wrong
cuck.
with
But
being a cuck, but if that's
okay,
what
so
you
you're a
think I
cuck
am,
then. You're a cuck.
If that's what you think I am, call it to me to my face. This
Yes, you're very
both
much a
sides of the
cuck.
mouth where you say shit when I'm not here, and
Okay,
then when I
yeah,
am
okay.
here, you're like, "Oh, I'm a Wick fan."
I don't know
That's
if you
all
were had
great,
hearing
that's
problems. I
all
just
fun.
said you're a cuck, and that's
That's
great.
inauthentic.
It's
And
wonderful
I'm
that you're a cuck.
glad. I'm glad that you're finally admitting it because I am bringing out the authenticity in you, and this is why you all need me.
yeah.
Okay.
I was a little
Need me.
disappointed when Pisco went easy on you tonight. I mean, it was like,
yeah, I was
You
going
know
so
what it
easy on you,
is?
Wick.
You know what it is? It's because Wick and I had a shouting match the first conversation we had because it was about Harry Reid in
true.
the Supreme Court, which is like the ultimate trigger for me. So, Tally, full disclosure, if we ever debate the Supreme Court, I might raise my voice. Okay, I might get red in the face and like start frothing at the mouth and twitching if we ever talk
You're
about the Supreme
against
Court.
Harry Reid.
I love Harry Reid. I miss Harry
Overthrowing
Reid.
the-
Let's
okay.
bring Harry Reid back. No,
Okay.
long
That's
story
okay,
short
silly
is,
serious.
yeah.
I think you were the reason that Trump won.
Who?
Why are you? Wait,
Totally
so
serious.
you
She's
why are you
talking
calling
shit
her
in
out?
chat. Get
Why-
on the
why-
phone. Okay, look. I know I'm not gonna
Because she's a
your
woman?
Show, I don't
Because
know
she's a
if
woman.
Collins, but if you
Because
want,
she's a
you want
woman.
to say it to my face, if you have any kind
What is she supposed to
of
do? She wasn't invited to the fucking show.
bravery, she can come anytime. I do call-ins, and she
Bro,
can come
she's
on my show. We can go
Australian.
on a
She, like,
different venue if
routinely
she
She's
wants.
the
kills-
But Silly
reason
Serious
Trump.
is one of the most brain-dead
You
people I've
stole her
ever tried
fucking
to
phrase.
read.
You said from the Silly to the
read
Serious.
some of her
You stole it
Substack,
from her.
and
You
that
stole
shit
her
is
idea.
like
It's from the Silly to the
ChatGPT
Serious.
level
Her
shit.
name is Silly Serious, and you stole that from her. From the Silly to the Serious. And no one wants to talk about it, but I'm bringing it up now since you went after her. You stole it from her.
Wait,
You're
are
a
you being
thief.
serious with
You
that?
are a thief. You are a thief. You have your phrase.
I can't
We have
tell
these
if
ideas
you're,
from the
yeah, I
silly
can't
to
tell
the
if you're actually
serious.
joking
Silly
now.
serious. That's her phrase. And
Do you
stole
owe
it.
her royalties, Wick?
Okay, you all are trolling me. Okay.
I think he might.
Yeah. I do.
What do you mean? I'm complete. I'm
He's
authentic.
you
I'm
sold
authentic.
that pretty well. I gotta
You
say,
did sell
like,
it pretty well. That's why I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, no, yeah, okay, it's a troll.
From the
Fair enough.
silly to the, I never even drew that fucking connection.
That's his phrase.
That's
That's-
hilarious.
wait,
Yes,
wait,
that's
wait,
great.
Welcome
that's
to a
his
Wick
phrase.
channel where we
I know
discuss
that's his-
cultural,
yeah.
political, and cultural,
Yeah.
and the silly, the serious. Yes.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
But yeah, I just
My
I just
body
don't
is-
respect people like her. It's just gross.
My body is
And
absorbing
dumb,
my fat
frankly.
reserves.
Retarded.
Oh, we gotta
Did you
we
just
gotta
call
let.
her retarded?
I did call her retarded, and I'll do it to her
Jesus.
face. I've had a
Bro.
conversation with before, and she was one of the most dumb people. Like, look, I debated Tim Pool, and I mopped the floor with him, but she was somehow dumber than
That
Tim
was
Pool.
pathetic. Your appearance at Tim Pool was pathetic. Everyone laughed at you.
Everyone laughed at me. Well,
Yeah, they
people
were like,
congratulate
"Why did
me
he
for that all the
shave?"
time. They think I did very good.
Did they now? Why?
Well,
why
Lactoid
on-
doesn't. Lactoid thinks I lost, but
No.
that's Lactoid.
Well, he's libertarian, so fuck lactoid. Okay, all right. Well, listen, we got to
Okay.
let Hutch go because he says that
understand.
he's absorbing something into his fat or something. I don't
dying.
know what he said. Yeah.
My
So
body is-
listen, thank you so much, Tally. You were a good sport about this, and yeah, well, the jury will render a verdict after. I was going to say cloture, being
Who's
sequestered.
the jury? That's a little scary.
That's a really. It's hopefully not chat, because if it's chat,
God.
Jesus, you're going down the row, if you know what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
we're gonna pull the lever.
The
but,
chat would have me walk the plank for sure, a couple times over.
Yeah. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thanks, chat, for watching.
Thank
Everybody,
you.
have a good night.
Hey, Wick. It's all good. Hey.
I know.
Much love.
We're all
Stay
good.
cool.
It's all fine.
And by the way, last
Wow.
message: Wick wants to
This is
expand
like
the
an
Supreme
episode of The
Court.